Hello, hello, hello. You are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. My name is Daragh. The person sitting across from me here is Shane.
Hello.
Two brothers talking all things rugby from the perspective of Leinster and Ireland.
That's right.
Now we've got a big show in store for you this week. Very Six Nations heavy. We had the opening weekend of the Six Nations and it was a doozy. It was sucky for some and joyous for others, but we had a couple of upsets, some close games.
Yeah. A good
really
standard of rugby overall.
Really entertaining rugby overall. Even the France-Italy game had that beautiful picture that France painted, and then the two close games in the other two fixtures, the home nations fixtures, were both gripping in their own way. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was while disappointing for us as Irish fans, it was a tremendously entertaining weekend of Six Nations rugby, which sets the competition up perfectly going forward. So for the show today, we're going to be looking at the last week's Six Nations games. We're going to look back on all of them quite briefly, just sort of going through those games and what happened to open the show. We're then going to look ahead to the three games this weekend, going in depth, previewing those games as best we can. Mm-hmm. And finally, once that's done, we're going to just take a quick look across the world. The Rugby Europe Championship wrapped up last weekend, last year's Rugby Championship with Georgia claiming the Grand Slam. Quick look back on that. Also going to just take a quick scan around the domestic rugby before wrapping up the show with all the news of the week.
Right, that's right, yeah. And for those who are coming back, you're very welcome back. If you're new here and you enjoy this kind of long-form rugby discussion, please do feel free to like and subscribe down below. It helps us enormously. And leave a comment as well, because we do enjoy hearing your takes on things and not just our own as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So without any further ado, I suppose we'll crack into the meat of the show, as there is a fair bit of meat to get through. And as you said, we're going to start off by just looking at the Six Nations and what happened in round one.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
So what did happen in round one? Well, the first thing that happened was that we had Italy as the curtain raisers, as they usually are, hosting France, and that game finished 50 points to 10. Nice round figures there. It was as expected, kind of. But what was nice to see was just how good France looked in terms of putting their attacking flow onto it and grabbing some lovely tries. Scoring 50 points is always good, regardless of the opposition.
Yeah.
It was a lovely game of rugby to kick things off, I thought.
It was. There was some beautiful attacking rugby, not least facilitated by how Italy approached the game, but France were able to get a lot off. Dupont obviously had a stellar first half where he just ran the show and threw some very lovely passes. Mm-hmm. Teddy Thomas looking outstanding, Arthur Vincent in the midfield looking excellent, Jalibert really betting into his role. Some nice performances in the pack, including Dylan Cretin coming in. For Francois Croix maybe staking a claim for that jersey in the future. All sorts of exciting things from a French perspective. From an Italian perspective, obviously it was, they're getting a lot of praise for sort of how they approach the game. Garbisi running a nice attack, moving the ball quite well.
Certainly made it pretty to watch. That seems to be where most people are angling from. From a fan's point of view, it was a beautiful game.
And when they had the ball, they wanted to move it, and when they didn't have the ball, they wanted to let France move it.
Yeah.
And so it was that was kind of the picture. I mean, if you look at it from a statistical point of view, there was a lot of promising play. They moved the ball very nicely in that first half. They actually got into the French 22 with the ball on 7 occasions.
Yeah.
And the issues really were just not taking chances. They registered 3 points from those 7 visits to the 22.
I remember that stat popped up. Was it 0.4 visits or 0.4 points per visit? It's just not enough in terms.
Indeed, like they had obviously Aldred came up with a big play when they first entered the 22, making the steal. That's one of those things that happens. But then, taking a 3-pointer, which is obviously a bugbear of yours. The Varney pass that bumped off the lock that went forward, just hectic play, not really controlling the ball. The forward pass ruling that chalked off the try, which is obviously gutting. A silly crossing play at the start of the second half.
Yeah.
Just so many little errors.
Yeah.
The Sperandio try towards the end was well taken, but so many little errors and so little control in a lot of ways. With Garbisi running the offense, it was quite nice.
Yeah, and
but
Varney driving a nice tempo from 9, but as you say, it was a little bit frantic at times as opposed to controlled. And it was what we were asking for them, as well as our usual like tackle technique. Their tackle completion rate was pretty low as well. I think 87 tackles made, 28 missed, which is pretty. You need to make more tackles than that.
Yeah.
But also on another thing, just like on a like not a statistical point, but just you need to be tougher to play against. Like the praise they're getting is for kind of in the sunshine in Rome, creating this lovely picture where it was a shootout with France, which they were always going to lose, but it was lovely to watch from a neutral fan point of view. But if you're Franco Smith, and his reaction to I think the first French try was a picture that was telling, where it's just head in his hands and the whole coaching box going no, because they had been like nearly bossing the game and certainly playing their own, putting their own game in, but not registering scores, and then allowing France into their territory and then compounding errors as well. There was one moment where
there was a sequence in particular that stood out. I mean, you could pick from a million sequences, but there was one in the middle of the half after the Varney pass went to deck on the French line. There was a French scrum and Italy were penalised at the scrum, and you could see they were frustrated. The chance was gone. They had to move down the field. But then from there, sort of tilted from the blown opportunity, you had Luca Bigi, the captain, just come flying in the side at the maul that France had from the line out up the pitch, gave them a chance to go down the field. France do so, and then from the ensuing play, it's the Fiku try with the little chip in behind, where the whole backline just comes forward, and after a phase, nobody looks up and thinks to look in that space and to cover the chip in behind after the initial set piece where the maul is formed and the offside line changes. They all fly up and nobody covers the space in behind. And it's just a really easy try, and it's an example of just compounding, turning one error into four. And moving.
The practical upshot was they felt they should have had a try, and maybe they should have, and maybe they should have executed better and whatever. But to allow to go from we should have had a try and we're in the right territory, and in a matter of like 2 minutes, suddenly you're under your own sticks because you've just made error after error after error, and you could see the frustration in Franco Smith in response to that try. It was everything, like coach killing errors. I'm sure they talked about it all week, but in practice, like one or two things didn't go their way, and then they do get tilted, and that's where confidence is based on evidence, and they don't have evidence to mine from in terms of beating these teams, and they just seem a little brittle at times.
When things started to go wrong for them, everything got more frantic. Even on the ball, where they had been working nice offense, things got more frantic. The passes got more loose. There is an element of like they do need to marry this lovely Franco Smith attack that's yielding some results without quite yielding any in the red zone. They're moving the ball quite nicely. They just need to marry that with just a little more tightness and a little more streetwiseness. And on a positive end, you might like it's a very young team that might come in time.
There were very few caps all around in that squad, so you do want them trying things, and even if they don't come off,
of course. On the negative end, it's just they don't seem to be throwing themselves into the game and staying in the moment and really committing to being difficult, like to making every try difficult to score, just throwing themselves at every tackle. Those are the kind of things that if you want to win games, they're going to have to deliver on. But obviously, it was a tough outing for them, and they did make it a pretty game to watch. And from a French perspective, it was a lovely performance.
It was the prettiest game to watch if you were watching it in a blue jersey, looking for La France. Like they drove a lovely tempo. Dupont is just a dream at 9, and even without Ntamack there, they had Jalibert. Feels like they can do whatever they like at 10 because they do have such a weapon at 9, especially against a kind of somewhat fragmented line. He's just so good at spotting those mismatches and getting his big game breaking forwards onto the ball with the good aggressive carries and contacts. And they really started to click. That sequence in I think it was the third quarter where they really put the game to bed with a couple of tries that were nice, and it was just they looked in full flow, and they're very, very pretty and ominous sight when they are.
Nothing too wild about what they do with the ball. It's all very sort of playmaky. They win contacts, they move the ball quickly, they find one-on-one matchups or guys in a bit of space like Teddy Thomas, and those guys make things happen. I mean, they do have a couple of nice first phase moves, but by and large there's nothing too clever about what they're doing in terms of moving the ball. Sometimes you'll see in other games that flood channels with men. There wasn't too much of that today, but I think what sets them apart is the link play and the vision in terms of finding a try. I mean, they run lines to score tries, and I think they're the best team in the world, I would say, including the All Blacks at the moment, at just turning line breaks into tries. Usually that same phase, but either that phase or the next phase after. They are brilliant at being clinical once they've broken the line, and it comes from excellent support play and great attacking instincts from the whole back line and some of the forward pack as well. That's the thing that really steps out. And while a lot of teams put 50 on Italy, it was very encouraging from a French perspective. The French team eyeing a Grand Slam this year, at least a Six Nations Championship.
It's the only, like, you can't win a Six Nations in an opening day fixture against Italy, but you can lose one or get close to blowing it. And they did nothing of the sort. They teed themselves up nicely for the tournament to come, and they sit atop the table currently as a result of that result. But then that was only the curtain raiser on Saturday, because next up we had the Calcutta Cup in Twickenham, England v Scotland. A game that had gone England's way for many, many years. They were saying 40 years since the last victory of Scotland in that ground, and sure enough, it came. 11 points to 6. Scotland ran out worthy winners, very worthy winners, in fact, on the day. They were the only team playing rugby, to be honest, on the pitch.
Well, this was just the highlight of the weekend as far as a game of rugby was concerned. 11 to 6 it finished, and yet it was compelling in so many ways, just from a narrative point of view. Scotland obviously getting that win. I thought actually that the way it was being coloured was a little ungenerous to Scotland, in the sense that, like, even though you're just saying, like, I know it's been forever since they won at Twickenham, but actually, like, this is the third time in 4 years they're going to be bringing the Calcutta Cup back to Murrayfield.
That is a more accurate way to put it, because this team have good memories against England. They just hadn't quite managed to string it all together. They did in beautiful phases in that 38-all draw, but they let that one slip results-wise, but they didn't let it slip this time.
Finn Russell has 3 wins and 1 draw in his last 4 games against England. Like, as much as England have been dominant against other sides, Scotland have consistently put it up to England and have yet to be given something to fear from them. And while, neither of us did call them to win the game, and in that sense it was a shock, it was not, certainly to Scotland it wasn't a shock, and it wasn't certainly the outside shot that a lot of sort of pundits were giving it, even during the game and after the game, selling it as this sort of miracle. It wasn't.
Didn't it look miraculous? No, even for the whole last quarter I was just convinced Scotland were going to win, because I couldn't see anywhere where English points were coming from. Even the 6 points they got, I thought they were very lucky to have. I thought Scotland kind of gift wrapped them for them at the end of the first half, but besides that they really did nothing with the ball all day. Scotland brought that physicality that disrupted the bullying style they want to have when they do have the ball. The Scottish tackling was ferocious and committed, but then also just in terms of England applying this kicking game, Scotland were the one applying the kicking game by the end. They were dominating.
And that was the difference. Like last year, the packs evened each other out, and Scotland even might have edged it at the set piece, and then England won the game with a couple of crucial plays, edging the territory battle, edging the kicking battle in that 13-6 win in Murrayfield. And this actually played out as a very similar game, except the difference maker was what went on in the kicking game. And just the combination. I think Finn Russell had sort of an up and down game. He wasn't his explosive self, but made enough plays. It sort of played out from a Scottish point of view pretty much ideally when you consider how well that team built last year, where it was just basically that team with a good 10, with a competent 10, as opposed to sort of your Van der Vaults and even Hastings not quite at the level.
Duncan Weir at one point.
Finn comes in and he can execute some nice passes, and he can probe, and he can make that try happen in a way that other 10s can't, which is the game deciding thing. And his kicking game was probing, and he put up some nice bombs. The one for Maitland to recover that led to the try was brilliant. But really it was all about Stuart Hogg.
Man of the match, Stewie.
He's gone to Exeter obviously and had a good time, but he had such a tough year in the captaincy last year. He didn't play particularly badly in general play, but some of the killer moments you look back to, like dropping the ball over the line against Ireland, making that mistake against England which leads to their only try, kicking the ball out against the French, that sort of game costing play. You had all these sort of bizarre negative moments
in an otherwise very good season.
And to come together and like with obviously with Finn back in the picture, but to steal his thunder and steal the show, booting those spiral balls, playing with just tremendous confidence, and really
defuse as well as
exposing
his kicks, diffusing England's kicks. Like England were not finding grass at all. They weren't finding anything. The kicks were speculative at best, and Hogg was just game for all of that. And in fact the other two as well, Van der Merwe and even Maitland under the high ball, they dominated their opposite numbers, and even that drop on 70 minutes from Johnny May, just a cold drop under no pressure, was just kind of a revealing moment of like, no, even the kicking game's going wrong for you today, lads. Nothing's really working. It's not purring. It's a Scottish day, and despite Scotland, like if you were a Scottish fan, I'm sure you were nervous in those last 10 minutes. But I, as a neutral watching it, was just convinced England aren't going to score here, despite the fact that Scotland were giving them ins, which would be a little work on for them. They need to be a little bit better at just, like, when they're that much better than a team on a day, get a score or two ahead instead.
It was an issue for them last year as well, and while the weather played into it, like with Finn Russell on the pitch as well, taking a few more scores would be crucial. And it does look like goal kicking is going to be an issue. You know, you talk about winter windy rugby.
It was one of the few games you'd really notice the lack of a Laidlaw. Actually, I think you said it as we were watching this, going, you could see why Laidlaw was in this team for so long and taking those kicks. They don't really have many out and out place kickers in there, because Finn isn't one. He doesn't tend to do it for racing either, so it's tough to expect it of him. But it's definitely could be a factor going on in winter rugby. But it didn't matter this time at all. They got the game winning try. It was a classic Six Nations contest in terms of the low scores, the physicality, the ferocity, and then ultimately one game winning moment, which came early enough in this instance with the Van der Merwe try, which was really well taken.
Yeah, and very exciting in terms of what that attack can build on. You're talking about like Finn Russell, Redpath, Hogg, the ball going from hand to hand to hand, and that gives Turner the ball with the 2-on-1 on the outside, which Doohan finishes so well. But I mean, like, that access could be really, really great.
Redpath looked really good.
Excellent passers of a ball, really great on the ball, a threat on the ball, a nightmare for defenders to deal with. And in this era of defence, I think there's definitely scope for those guys when put into position to open up some defences. So it's exciting for Scotland.
It is.
I mean, they owned the set piece battle.
Yes.
They poached some lineouts. George Turner was incredible with his throwing darts. He had so many lineouts to throw early in the game.
I thought he was in the running for man of the match, considering just even coming in, like, they were pre-match talk about them being light in the tight, which was wrong chat, but just the fact that they were missing McAnally and Fraser Brown as well, so him coming in as ostensibly third choice and putting in such a classy showing as that was really worthy of admiration as well. And then just some key like Hamish Watson mopping up every loose little bit of ball that seemed to materialise. It was Hamish on the end of it.
He made so many plays, carried ferociously. Matt Fagerson likewise, and then Johnny Gray just
and the other the two Fagersons actually, was it Matt, Xander and Matt were very good in the loose, and Xander had one hiccup in the very first scrum. He went down and you were very annoyed at him for it, but then they won a scrum penalty the next engagement, and it was just
they were all over. They fancied it, and they knew they had the measure of the English pack, and there are a few packs who they don't have the measure of, and genuinely, if they don't get in their own way, the makeup of this team is championship quality. It's excellent. Their pack is ferocious. It's physical. With Johnny Gray now back to top form, there's just a lot of defensive and offensive playmakers, great ball carrying, an excellent world class 10, a lovely operator outside him in Redpath, world class fullback, and excellent finishers out wide. Even Chris Harris is just like a perfect balance to Redpath in terms of what they do. There are questions about what they'll do defensively. Obviously England didn't ask too many questions, but it's very, very exciting for Scotland. I mean,
it's their toughest fixture historically, their toughest fixture out of the way in week one, and now they're in great shape to make a run for some silverware, be it a triple crown or even more. Maybe they're in great shape after week one. England, by contrast, are backs to the wall again after an opening day loss, which was the same last year as well. Then they went on to win it. So
last year, the bonus point they were given on week one proved crucial. It's what won them the tournament, and as is why I don't really resent the Scots for going for that drop goal. It was an awful pass from Steele, which kind of gave England the in. But I mean, if they'd kicked that drop goal, it would have been great to deprive England of the bonus point. And I love that they were thinking about that. They were thinking on a championship level, because they need to be. They should be confident. But from an England point of view, they get out with a bonus point, which could be crucial. But my oh my, they do have to improve.
They didn't really deserve. If they were honest with themselves, they'd tell themselves they didn't deserve that bonus point. They escaped with one because, as I said, the 6 points they scored felt cheap. They felt like the Scots just handed them to them.
The chance Scotland gave them, the one more possession, was no mercy. Like, they weren't going to score.
No.
And you spend a whole season refusing to attack, and then when you have to attack, you can't remember how.
Yeah,
and that was kind of what it was like.
You see it with some teams as well, but England have spent pretty much a season kicking the ball and defending, and it was exposed. Like the long exits, the exits that are in field, were something that were employed by Scotland again.
Yeah.
We saw it with France with Boutier as well. It seems to be their undoing because they will kick it back, and then even when George Ford came in as a last chance saloon kind of thing, we're bringing in our dual distributors. First time he got a bit of clean ball in the middle third, he kicked it away as well. It was weird to watch.
The kicks weren't good either.
No.
Like, they weren't moving the defence around. Scotland were so wise to it, and they just hammer it deep. There was no counter-attacking threat, so the Scots could just hammer it deep.
Yeah, you got
Stuart Hogg's spiral kick, fantastic.
Yeah.
And what I love about that as well is that it's going to alter the game again. I mean, last year we got into this position where every team off restarts from England at the World Cup, inspired by England's World Cup dismantlings of Australia and New Zealand. Every team off the restart now pings it deep into the corner, puts the pressure on. You saw England get a bit of purchase early doors, putting pressure on the Ali Price left foot box kick. But Scotland did an excellent job of making the adjustment there. But that's been sort of the go-to tactic for just about every team. But now the teams are coming in with their Boutiers and their Hoggs and their long spirals. You might actually start to see that tactic fail to work a bit more, and the pinning back not being the best option, and then all of a sudden you might have a couple of teams trying to kick to recover.
What it is, it's an anti-box kick play, and they did it as well in this instance. They kick to the wrong side for whatever footed, like if it's a left footer they kick to the right hand side, so it's curling away from the touchline, and if it's a right footer, vice versa. England have done that uniformly for the whole 2 years.
Since
2 years. The only exception was the World Cup final when they kicked it to Villy LaRue. But besides that, they've tried to pin teams back and relied on the box kicking exit into touch, where they're setting up an offensive set from within between the 10 metre and the 22. That's what their whole game is. And shy of achieving that set piece, they seem content to just kick it until they do.
They don't play any rugby in their own half. I mean, the stats kind of reveal it. How badly did the territory game go for them? They ended up with 30% territory, which is what's not like them. But 35% possession, that's right where they have been. Here's the mad stats. They won 56 rucks, right? So they had 25 gain line carries. So they had 25 carries. They carried the ball 25 times, no clean breaks, 2 offloads, 35 kicks from hand. So they kicked way more than they carried in the whole game.
It's nuts.
For
such a big dynamic team, and
crazy.
when you've seen what Sarries
Ollie
have done
Lawrence comes into the team at 12. Why on earth would you start Ollie Lawrence when you've no business in having him touch the ball?
Well, as we had thought, the thought was to run down Redpath's channel and try and test him, which they just didn't do at all. So Redpath remains, as he looked great, he remains largely untested on defence because England did not go there. They
just did come up with a clutch turnover towards the end, which was great.
He had a great performance all round, but I'd expect sterner questions to be asked of a Scottish defence in any other game, even the Italy game, because they'll keep the ball in hand and go through some phases. It was bizarre to see England so impotent, but can't say I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was a fantastic game to watch, but England will really need to use this window now to kind of reset things and try and set some things right. They need to start playing a bit more rugby.
And they can. It's not beyond them, of course.
No, it's not. They're still the champions.
We all know the talent that they have, and they may yet be back. We will come back to those teams in the previews later on, but that was a tremendous game, by certainly the game of the weekend. The other game, Sunday's game,
in running, it was a good game too. But
Wales against Ireland. I see what I've written down here is Wales 16, Ireland 21. That's not right. It's the other way around. Wales 21, Ireland 16.
We're still dreaming here.
A 5-point win for Wales.
Yes.
Obviously Ireland with 14 men. Very attritional game by and large.
It's bandied around a lot, but there were a hell of a lot of knocks from the moment Lydia went off, and then I think James Ryan followed him shortly after, and it was
4 head injuries in the game, rake load of injuries. It was hotly contested and quite physical, and just bizarrely attritional as well. But it was a close game, very dramatic towards the end. Starting with Wales, just looking at it from their perspective, they were in a position where they just desperately needed a win of any kind.
Yeah, they
did get that. Did a great job in the third quarter of just taking the couple of tries. I mean, I didn't think they were excellent, to be honest, at just creating and finding entry points. There was a lot of playoff 9. Dan Biggar was very not really a factor, which is weird.
Unlike him, he's unusual.
But it was tactical. Like, they didn't really use him as a kicking option. They didn't really kick to. They did like the kicks that they kicked in the middle of the park were all box kicks, and none of them really worked.
Yeah.
Apart from like the odd Keith Earls drop, but it wasn't really born of pressure or born of anything.
Yeah.
So the entry points they got into the 22 were actually quite lucky. Like, it was a Keith Earls sliced kick that was out in the full, which gave them a line out 5 out for one of the tries. The other one was a Gary Ringrose knock on where he was trying to break out off the scrum.
Yeah.
But what they did so well was off those.
The transition
drove
was
a
great.
tempo, moved the ball really well, took a couple of nice tries,
yes,
and did it at speed and with a bit of vision. I thought Navidi coming into the game was magnificent. Obviously, it sucked that Lydia went off, and he was doing a good job of chopping Stander and the like.
Yeah.
But Navidi coming in was an excellent playmaker. Tipperick in the back line. They moved the ball really well once they get into a position to attack, but it's just generating those positions and moving down the field where there'd be issues.
Yeah.
And I thought actually what was alarming was the second quarter after the red card. Like, they conceded 13 straight points, and it was really like Ireland had all the ball. Like, they exited really well with the
and it wasn't just that, they were winning all the collisions as well. There was a period in that quarter where Wales just were soaking every tackle.
Yeah, and they just wore them down.
Speed,
they I think 3 consecutive drives they just scored. They chalked up points. The Wales kicked off, Ireland hammered it deep, Wales gave Ireland back the ball, and Ireland just set up another attack, and it was just very, very easy. There wasn't anything clever about what Ireland were doing. It was simple 1-out runners. But when they did it with a bit of pace and they were winning contacts, Wales found it tough to deal with. And they didn't really have a jackal threat. I think they made 3 turnovers in the game, despite having Ireland having over 60% of possession, as compared to Ireland's 6 turnovers. So that was kind of alarming for them, and ultimately just conceded the try. But I think they rallied well in the second half and made a better defensive show of it. Up until that last sequence where they tried to lose the game, panicked, gave up soak tackles, gave up penalties. George North giving away that penalty towards the end, and they were blessed that Billy Burns kicked it dead, because they were putting themselves in a position to lose a game they shouldn't have lost against 14 men. Although shout out to Tipperick, who, like, that tackle on Gary Ringrose was make or break when Ringrose breaks through, and he stepped the fullback, and it's, oh my god, he's going to score. He had the pace on everybody, and it was a world class tackle. His 29th of the game, and when you consider what a weapon he is on offense, just putting in that much output on defense as well.
He's a workhorse. He's absolutely fantastic.
He's been fantastic. By far their best player. Even better than Alan Wynne-Jones at the moment.
Alan Wynne-Jones,
he's their best player.
He was struggling a bit towards the end with the pace of it, and actually their line out, it was a turnaround from the last few seasons in terms of Ireland were pilfering a few of their line outs, and they weren't quite firing well. Ken Owen's obviously fresh back in, but they did, as you said, they did the most important thing from a Wales point of view, which was getting a win, getting off to a winning start, and now they're
such a momentum team.
They have a chance for a Grand Slam now. Genuinely they can keep improving week on week. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, despite the poor season
and the looming injury crisis,
and the fact that, as you said, they nearly tried to blow it at home, but they didn't. And just then from our own point of view, last but not least, I guess, Ireland, it was a bad start to this campaign. Obviously the red card was obviously a red card, but it set them way behind in terms of what their plan was for the game and what their output then had to be. From then, they had put together a nice quarter in response to that, but a few key individual mistakes, like on a micro scale, if you're looking at it, there were a few mistakes. You had Peter O'Mahony with the red card. You had Keith Earls with several mistakes throughout the course of the game, including some key drops, kick out on the full.
Well, that sequence leading up to the try where he smacks a guy in the air and gives away a penalty, Wales kick it down, and then Ireland poach the line out, and instantly he just kicks out in the full and gives them a line out 5. And then he had a couple of drops from high balls as well. Keith Earls kind of all over the place.
And then Billy Burns, as you pointed out, with the kick out on the full, and then Sexton had done one similar as well in the early going. It's a lot of it was the old guard not delivering in that regard. Like a lot of their key playmakers were guys like Gary Ringrose or James Lowe, who were just not seeing enough ball.
Even Ronan Kelleher, like off the bench, there was a lot. Like Henshaw had a good game as well. well. I mean, I think he was relishing the role of auxiliary flanker that he was cast in
Yes.
when Peter O'Mahony wasn't in. But I mean, like, Henshaw can work in a funny kind of a way. I've given out about him not being able to pass from 12, but he can work as a guy running onto the ball if it's married with other plays. But it's at halfback, and as you say, the veterans, they really are struggling. Like, Sexton was awful. Like, when I watched the game back today, I think he was all over the place,
sitting deep and
he
shipping it along.
He looked like a guy who was terrified of taking a contact, which isn't like him. He was very much sitting back and just throwing sort of half passes. Sometimes he was getting lost. He was just kicking the ball away with poor grubbers.
Yeah.
His kicking was nowhere near good enough. He didn't distribute as well as Gary Ringrose from 13.
Nope.
And likewise Conor Murray, like the distribution at times he could get the speed up and you felt like there was enough there, but when Gibson Park came on, the tempo was much quicker and they were able to link more.
Yeah.
And the reality is for Ireland, like, that they have excellent playmakers. I mean, we didn't even touch on Ty Byrne,
who
was
was
awesome,
brilliant all
both sides
game.
of the ball.
Yeah, especially as soon as the red card came, he really stepped up. He made so many great plays in the line out, in the loose, all over,
everywhere,
80 plus minutes.
No James Ryan, no Peter O'Mahony in there, no leadership core, and he was out there making plays. And it was a lot of young guys who are talented and exciting out there trying to make plays. Jordan Larmour even off the bench, and a halfback combination that neither facilitates it nor adds to the game in any way, just sucks the tempo out of it.
Yeah.
And actually, like, you look at the responsibility of the Welsh points. They had the 2 tries, obviously. Now, the first Welsh try was a Ringrose error. It was one of very few Ringrose errors. The response to
the
it,
offload,
the response to it was poor from Ian Henderson, who had an otherwise decent contribution, but he had like a trifecta of horrible plays. Like, Ringrose knocks the ball on, and the ball falls to him, and he could just pick it up, and it's dead play in a Welsh scrum, but he fumbles it, and Wales pick it up. And then he kind of half makes a tackle and doesn't roll away and gives a penalty away, and then he gets up and he's slow to cover the blind side and he leans into the ruck and Navidi spots it and just flicks it out to George North, and he's not in the space that he should be. So it's actually a horrible picture for Ian Henderson. But outside of that score, like, the other tries is set up entirely from just a nothing kicking duel to calamitous errors from Keith Earls.
And 7 points.
Yeah, and it's 7 points. And then the 3 3-pointers, Peter O'Mahony entry at the side, Johnny Sexton high tackle, Conor Murray taking out a blocker.
Yeah.
And it's like the veterans of the team, the alleged leadership core are not helping the young guys. And the young guys are playing well in spite of it.
Yeah.
And it puts them in this weird position where, I don't know, are they going to keep leaning into these guys? Like, they really did hurt them.
Yeah.
I thought Sexton and Murray really hurt Ireland.
Yeah.
I thought they didn't make a good tempo. They didn't kick well.
Yeah.
They didn't make any really good plays. And outside them, things were happening.
Yeah.
And they didn't facilitate any of it. They didn't see the game. Like, I was thinking, like, your ideal situation with a Sexton is like that he's going to be this sort of veteran quarterback. You know, he doesn't quite have the talent and the raw ability that he used to, but what he does have is this ability to read defenders and put his talented, weapons on the ball in space. And it's not happening.
You're not seeing any of that.
Yeah, I would be almost willing to stick a fork in it and just get a guy like Billy Burns in, as bad as his cameo was, just to facilitate the guys around him and not try and force the issue so much, not dictate the tempos and make it slower so that it suits you.
To be honest, I agree. I think both halfbacks were bad. What I do think is our macro point is right. Like, Sexton isn't at the level he was. Unfortunately, he still is our best 10 at the moment in the country.
Is he?
I kind of think so, because I just don't rate the calibre of the other guys. And then Billy Burns' cameo was another one to reinforce that. What I just like, you want someone taking the jersey off him. He's not producing at the level he was. Obviously, that's true. But if you don't have any adequate replacements for him, you may have to stick with him. What we do have is adequate replacements at 9. We actually have a load of 9s who aren't in the squad who are playing better rugby than Conor Murray at the moment.
Yeah.
And the difference when Gibson Park was on was night and day. Like even if Sexton's there, it'll be forced upon him a quicker tempo if he's playing with Gibson Park.
Yeah, listen, I hear you.
The 9 sets the tempo, and our tempo is. It's not just slow.
Sexton sets the tempo as well, though. Sexton's very slow at arranging what the offense does, and he's very, very quick to lose patience and sit deep and kick the ball in the air.
That's true.
And Ross Byrne is as well, but Billy Burns, by contrast, he doesn't do anything like flash. And honestly, like the crossfield kick he kicks and the long skip pass, you'd be like, you don't need to make plays out there, kid. Just catch the ball and give it to Henshaw and then catch the ball. Just move the ball. Just move one play wider. Because Ireland's shape is so rudimentary anyway, and so much of what Ireland's attack is about is what happens on the ball. But anyway, we always go off on Ireland, and we will talk about them a little later on. This game was about Wales ultimately. It was about them notching up the win, and Ireland will have things to ponder, and we'll touch on them in more detail when we get into the preview, if there is more detail to be got.
Indeed. So I suppose with that was the weekend's action. It was a fantastic way to kick off this historic tournament. Obviously the lack of crowds was a factor in some games, but also just a bit disappointing given the usual colour of the Six Nations.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great opening weekend for all kinds of reasons, and I think it sets up the competition in a fascinating way that a lot of folks didn't see coming. It makes Scotland contenders, it makes Wales contenders, England are still in the mix, France are now heavy favourites, and Ireland obviously are limping along but could yet rally and be in the mix themselves.
True.
So you do have this real 5-team bust up, and it's exciting. It's why this competition has the moniker, the self-ascribed moniker of best rugby tournament in the world, is because there's always drama, and
each weekend shifts it. Changes the dynamic at 1 week at a time. And so with week 1 in the books, we will move on to our preview section.
Yes.
So first up, we have England versus Italy. As it was in the first weekend, we have Italy serving as curtain raisers for the action to come.
Yeah, appropriately enough.
Appropriately enough, I think that's a good place for them. That's going to be kicking off on Saturday, 13th February at 2:15. That's local and GMT in Twickenham. And the weather is set to be, judging by when we're looking at it, may change, but set to be pretty cold. Some light winds, possibility of some light snow. It's generally cold, but pretty all right, to be honest. Winter rugby.
We'll see that conditions in Dublin on Sunday are to be much worse, but it is to be cold, -1 kind of temperature, which obviously wouldn't suit the Italians too much, given they were playing in 18 degrees last week.
Yes, that's right.
But it's to be around freezing, but not too inhibiting as far as
wind
rugby
and
playing
rain
is
and
concerned.
such. Yeah. And then it's going to be reffed by the Mike Adamson, the Scottish official, will be the man with the whistle in the middle. Just in terms of the colour of the game, it's England who are pretty rocked and will have backs to the wall. They're obviously the home team again, but nothing short of a bonus point win will do in terms of getting things started for them in their campaign. But more widely than that, they need to start using the ball more effectively. It's kind of
play some of their guys into form as well, and move the ball with a bit of sharpness and a bit of coolness. Work their offense. I mean, it's a perfect game to have after a game as stale as last week,
and with a gap week to come after it as well. There's a chance to work on some stuff midweek. Try and use the ball a bit more effectively. Break down Italy. They can break down Italy in myriad different ways. They can pick and choose, but they should be trying to work on their ball and hand play.
Gives them a great chance to do that. From an Italian perspective, I mean, I just think tightening up and being a bit smarter, not reinventing the wheel, playing a lot of those same offensive shapes, really allowing Garbisi to grow as a play caller and a runner of an offense, but then at the same time just doubling down and focusing on not compounding mistakes, staying in the moment, just player by player, staying in the moment and not getting slumped shoulders, heads down, and trying to mitigate losses if they come, and trying to make things awkward and trying to make teams work for every score and every inch against them. You're not going to score on the inside, you're going to have to score out wide, for example. You've gotten into the 22 where you're not going to pick and jam your way over the line, and at times they can be out muscled, at times they can be opened up, and at other times they just aren't focused and are just letting teams in, and those are the kind of things that they have to limit.
They need to get a bit more of that next play mentality. Like you saw, it's something that you see to great credit in Fiji in years gone by. Even poor Fiji teams that were routinely getting hosed, even if they were 30 points to 0 down against Australia, there's still a moment where there's a try on and it's like, oh, there's a try, let's go. And it's that next play mentality where your head's still up, whereas with Italy it feels like each blow against them, be it them not scoring or be it the opposition scoring, it just weighs heavily, and then the shoulders slump a little more, and then suddenly fatigue does become a factor when you're losing the game by that much. They need kind of goldfish memories as far as that's concerned, and just looking at the next play, and as you say, be tight, be difficult, be composed, try and make it awkward for England. It's going to be a snowy one. Gritty. England are struggling to get their offense going. Bring pressure, try and be tougher to play against. I'm sure that's what Franco Smith is looking for, judging by his response to that France try in the first game. He wants his team to be a bit bit tougher than they are showing at the moment, and it seems like that's got to be the goal for Italy. Then just moving on, an overlook at the squads. Obviously there are a few updates from last week. Kyle Sinclair, from England's point of view, his suspension is over. He was to miss week 1, but he's back now and he's joined the squad, as too has Mako Vunipola. So two big men. It adds a hell of a lot of heft to an already hefty pack. And the inclusion of those two means that Harry Williams is cut from the squad as well.
Yeah, actually, he's obviously just unfancied by Eddie Jones.
Eddie Jones.
I thought he improved the English scrum against Scotland when he came on.
Yeah.
Actually won a penalty at one point, and I do think of him as a better scrummager than Will Stewart, although Stewart is probably a bit more use around the loose. But I like Harry Williams, and it's kind of been an interesting time for him, unable in Eddie Jones's mind to break into the squad, as is the case with so many.
It's true, so many good players. And then, just one more question mark I have is Billy V's poor form going to cost him his place at any point soon? We don't have the teams named in front of us as it is. I expect probably not, but considering his performance and his showing against Scotland, the fact that European Player of the Year and Champions Cup champion Sam Simmonds isn't in the squad seems a bit odd to me.
Well, they're not going to change that at this stage.
No.
I think it's an interesting one this week with selection. Obviously, you've a regular load of options for this game. But I do think with the Sarries guys like Jamie George and Billy Vunipola and now Mako coming back in, like, this is an opportunity to play them, and they need game time. They need minutes. Rugby.
Sure, the championship just set up its schedule, and it doesn't start till March. So it's like, these guys need rugby. And judging by some of the performances, even Itoje, who was everywhere in that machine, he was giving away a few loose penalties that were kind of looked rusty, you know. So they need hitouts. They need a bit of rugby under their belt.
So I would be surprised to see them drop too many of the Sarries, but I wouldn't. There's potential for bolters to be thrown in. You're looking in the direction of Paolo Odogwu, who's been highly rated. The Wasps winger could come in, add a bit of zip, add a bit of tempo. I'd love to see them give Harry Randall a shout at scrum half.
Yeah, he's been great for Bristol. Drives a nice tempo.
Yeah, Dan Robson obviously with the horror cameo.
Oh my god, he was awful.
Ben Youngs wasn't great either, giving away a couple of sloppy passes.
Yeah. And Ben Spencer watches on from Bath.
Yes.
What's going on? What's craziness? I never understood or understand the English selection things. I think it feels like sometimes there are a lot of things left out. And then from an Italy point of view, as far as squads are concerned, Marco Zanon, the very impressive Marco Zanon, will miss out, unfortunately. He suffered a muscular injury to his right leg last week, and he's left the squad to rehabilitate back in Benetton. And that will cost him. Traore, Meyer and Mbanda all did suffer knocks as well, and they're in a battle to try. They're still with the squad. They didn't get released, but they're kind of touch and go whether they'll start this weekend. And I think Traore probably won't.
They added Lavati to the squad, which would make you think that. I tell you, they're very if Meyer and Mbanda can't play, they're very light in the back row, which is an area of strength for them. Like with no Negri, no Pelledri, Mbanda is a great player as well, and Meyer was sort of that other South African coming in and being physical. Meyer looked in bad condition when he went off last week, so
he did.
It's hard to imagine. Hopefully Mbanda's okay, but like they are quite stretched in that area, which is unfortunate for them.
It's such a taxing area because the Six Nations games often do end up in a dogfight in the back row.
90% of Italy's work as well, you know, so it is rough on them there. From a squad point of view. What is exciting is that there's a chance to put Carlo Canna back in the mix. Obviously Ignacio Brex, who was at 12, will likely shift over to 13.
Probably.
He made one good break, but he
looks a little slow as well.
A lot slow.
If you're to put him at 13 and Carlo Canna converted 10 at 12, that seems a bit soft in the midfield if England choose to run there.
Well, the other thing is that like England have been so stubborn, and Eddie Jones made the point I think last year that he was going to use this year, speaking of last year, and this year, speaking of this year, 2020 and 21, to develop sort of the kicking game and the defence, and that's what it's all going to be about, and then we'll work on the attack for the next 2 years, 4-year project. And he can be very stubborn with his ways. Like, one wonders, we know from an Ireland point of view, if your one track game plan gets found out, it doesn't stop getting found out no matter how well you execute it, you know. And from an English point of view, I don't know if they keep playing the way they're playing, they're going to lose games. So I don't know if they want that. But it's possible that they go out, as they did when they played Italy in the autumn in the last Six Nations game, when they needed to rack up a score and didn't really, they just got away with it. But they just kicked the leather off the ball for the whole game. And if that's the case, I mean, Italy, you saw the blueprint from Scotland, you saw it from France, kicking it deep, Carlo Cano is going to have a big task on him, young Garbisi as well.
Yeah.
They do like to move the ball well, but England are ferocious. Getting it outside them is going to be tough. They are going to need to do that on occasion. They do have the dual distributors. It involves standing deep and passing crisply. But kicks in behind and deep kicks could be an entry point for them in the game.
Yeah.
I would wonder about the fullback position. They've had Trulla in there who hasn't been too impressive. I like the thing in my head that's screaming is that Tommy Allen is in the squad. Yeah. I would if I was Franco Smith, I might take a gamble on Tommy Allen at 15.
Or him at 10 with Garbisi at 15
No, Garbisi at 10.
Garbisi is at 10.
Garbisi's the 10 forever, I think.
So. He's a young
he
man.
Runs
he
the offense. Well. He's doing a great job of it.
Yeah.
But I think chucking a rogue Tommy Allen in there at fullback to add a kicking dimension, and he also adds a lot of zip to the game in a way that I just wasn't impressed with the back three particularly, and even Trulla at 15 in particular didn't offer much.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting shout.
In terms of the other squad, they actually have an uncapped winger, Pierre Bruno, as well, to throw into the mix.
Yeah.
And the other the danger man, Monte Ione, is in there, and they need to get him the ball a bit more often because he was hungry for work in that game, and he looks dangerous when he gets his hand on it. So yeah, maybe mixing up that fullback jersey could be a good way to do that. But we'll just go through both teams in terms of this game. And we'll start with the home team, which is England, and starting with their defence, because normally we'll start with offence, but with England it's the defence, because that's kind of been what they've, as we said, it's what they're building their game on. It's been stellar for years now. We were talking last week in the preview of the whole tournament just how few points they've been conceding in all of their games last year, which is a consistent trend. It's been brilliant. With that in mind, this Italy offence, this kind of fledgling Italy offence with its wide attempt, it's lots of ambition with a little unslickness here and there, should be easy pickings for a defence of this calibre. They should be able to swarm them, bully them, impose themselves on them, force errors, drops, loose kicks, and then ideally punish them from it. That should be they punish their mistakes with ball in hand with good line speed and pressure. That's going to be a key part of the English game. Force them into the aimless kicking is definitely a factor. The question is just what England will do when they do that to them. Like, will they be?
Yeah, and the other question, obviously, last week one of the narratives we didn't go into was just the discipline as well. Like, they're so, like they weren't making the plays on the kicks, and they weren't making the plays on offense. They were so determined to make their plays on defense that they ended up just sort of flying into rucks, flying offside, making dumb plays, and forcing the issue. And they gave away just what felt like just a rake load of penalties.
I think at the end 15 in the end, which felt like 30.
Yeah, no, it looked like way more in that first half. It felt like they conceded 15 by 20 minutes in it. They just kept conceding penalties.
Yeah.
And that's obviously a work on for them. Don't force the issue. Do come out and swallow them up. And if they don't concede the penalties, they'll be in a much better position.
Yeah.
But as you say, from an offensive point of view,
that's where the question mark comes. I'm sure for most England fans as well, it's frustrating viewing at times to have guys like Farrell and Slade who are distributing forces in the midfield, and yet all they're there to do is kick seemingly, and they're not distributing at all.
There was such a lack of patience about them as well last week, in terms of, like, after 3 phases that went wrong, they kind of gave up on it, and there was none of that sort of, like 2 or 3 screens and multiple options and multiple dimensions with Farrell picking passes. Farrell didn't want to pick passes, and it's going to be a cold game again. They're going to have to just, I think they're going to have to move the ball and work that sort of offense, or at least some version of that offense that was working well for them, that involved multiple options and multiple distributors, and the potential to go wide or go narrow, and then just isolate weak Italian defenders and put hard runners on them. And that's where you can get good plays for the likes of Ollie Lawrence or whoever they go for on that channel.
It's tough, isn't it? Because they did, like, Saracens getting punished the way they was obviously the right thing to do, but like a lot of England's shape and success was born from that Saracens team and what they were doing in European rugby, and
copy pasted from the Saracens offense. Like, the biggest false narrative in rugby, in European rugby for a couple of years, was that Saracens are a defensive big team.
Yeah.
And while they kind of were in 20 last year, or 2020 and 2019, maybe a little less, flashed.
And then a few years prior, 2015, when they had the Wolfpack and stuff, that was their thing. But
with Alex Good at his pump and Owen Farrell, they worked just this lovely, sophisticated offense where every sequence off, it doesn't matter what phase, they had forward pods everywhere. They were running different screens with 2 forward runners and men in behind with extra runners off
just
them.
Pick the right pass.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Through they go.
It was just there was always a gap somewhere, and they were always picking the right pass, and it was just a beautifully designed offense that was very much like off the playbook. And a disciplined offense, and it felt like the future of rugby at the time, and they deployed it to a T at the World Cup.
Yeah,
and since then, just no offense.
Sarries has disappeared, and so too at the same time has England's offensive chops, and now Exeter are the top team in England, a very defensive, bludgeoning team, and England look a bit more defensive and bludgeoning, and then when they were forced into an offensive set at the end of last week's game, they looked rusty as all hell.
Say what you want about Exeter, at least they are clinical.
Oh yeah,
I know that sort of the rudimentary pick and jam style is less likely to work at test level, although you'd fancy it against Italy.
Yeah,
they're going to have to work something else, and it's on the coaching ticket to come up with something.
Design something cool. Like you'd love to see it. They have so many weapons. Like you were pointing out, Anthony Watson had we noticed him at first well into the second half with 2 touches off a kick that it was like, oh, there's Anthony Watson. Haven't seen him all day, and then he got hauled off. The only
Johnny May highlights were him getting a couple of knock-ons from kicks and him getting held up by Johnny Gray.
Yeah,
that were his moments. He wasn't put in space once, and that's clearly something that England are going to want to be doing.
Yeah, sure. When this time 2 years ago, it was all about Farrell to Johnny May, and that was try time, and it's like those guys are still in the team, and they're still able to do it. And as you say, it is Italy, so they can beat them. They can choose to beat them any which way. Even the last game they had against them, they did kick the leather off the ball, and they still got tries from it because Italy gave them to them. So there's going to be, you can win it whatever way you like, but if you're going forward in this competition and going forward in general, you need to start working more with the ball, and this is a perfect chance to try and work on some of those things. And then from Italy's point of view, just completely different from their offensive point of view. Like, they showed some progress. They were, as you said, they were getting credit for the way they approached the game against the French. I like their shape, and I like the fact that they're trying to get things wide. I like that they're trusting Garbisi and young Varney to set a nice tempo for him. I like a lot about what they're doing. Sometimes the passing is letting them down, just the technical skill of passing, especially when you're trying to put together those 5-6 pass plays to reach the extremities. Some of them are just a little inaccurate, either up here, behind here, checking the runner, and that's enough to get swallowed up by these top teams they're facing. But I think they should persist with it, not least because they have no chance if they're just going to go off 9 and run into the English. They could do that all day. They're never going to yield anything. They need to try to get outside them and behind them with their kicking game. This is what you alluded to as well, like Carlo Cano.
For me, 12. Cano in the autumn was a vital cog in what they were doing, and I'd be happy to see him back in there, albeit unfortunate it's at the expense of Zanon.
Ideally you'd have him and Zanon in there. That would be their nicest.
Brex to me feels like a failed experiment, although we will likely see him again on the outside centre position, which is apparently his preferred position, so there is that. But just expanding the field, attacking the width of it, which they're doing a great job of doing, and then just putting in probing kicks when to test the backfield coverage and to get in behind the wingers. That does have to come with a chase. Ideally they go out of play, because obviously there's the danger of a Daly picking it up and launching it back with interest.
Yes, it's true.
You don't want that to happen, needless to say. But just putting England under pressure and owning the territory game is going to be crucial when they're on the ball.
And to be honest, the equation as well for all teams, including Italy, as far as exits are concerned, is try and pump them deep. It's the recipe against England. You need to be able to get them. Like, if Varney's tamely box kicking it out on the full from his own 22, you're going, what are you doing?
That's what you want you to do.
Exactly. Like none of that.
No, kick it deep, because at the moment, if you kick the ball downfield and reach their 10, England simply won't counterattack. And they'll just kick it in the air. Now maybe that'll change in this game, and they do have to. That does have to be caveated.
And England do tend to be confident against Italy. They very much do. They don't struggle for it at all. They know that they're the better team, and when England know that they're the better team, they tend to perform better. It's one of their good qualities in their temperament. It's the same can't be said about Scotland or Ireland or the like, who wear the favourites tag with such weight and chagrin. England tend to hose Italy, and they do it in any different picture you like. But with Italy, from Italy's point of view, they have to just approach this game with the lessons you learn about this England team. So for the moment, yes, pump it deep. If they counter-attack and score, well, fair enough. You may have to change it on the fly, change the plan, but as it is, you're going to go deep on exit. But then the other thing, which I always mention, is just you got to exert early pressure with points. Like they're only winning picture. Like it's still very slim chance. They're in all likelihood going to lose this game. It's away in Twickenham. But like they don't beat England, and the day that they do beat England, it involves them shooting into a lead and holding on for dear life. I'm convinced of that. They're not going to be in a 9-9 draw and a scrap at 60 minutes and then kicking a winning drop goal.
They're just England spend a game refusing to attack.
They're not going to. They're still going to cough up scores. They need to score tries, and they need to try to score tries in the first quarter when they have the zip about them. And
the red zone return is a massive concern.
It is, obviously. That's the caveat. England's red zone defence is so awesome, but what you'd like to see is, even if they're going for it, kick the corner, go for it. Even if the line-out's turned over straight away and it's cleared, that's still okay. Like it's like a 3-pointer is just no use to you. You should be focusing on trying to score at least 20 points, which isn't going to happen by you building a score with 3-pointers. There's no pressure there. But what could happen is you score a try on the third or fourth attempt, because if England are going to keep kicking from their own half and you're kicking the corner, you're playing good territory game anyway. What their issue is that when the first one gets repelled, as we saw last week, what you can't afford to do then is go, penalty. Another penalty. Now we're under our own sticks, which could so easily happen. But you just gotta trust in the process. We're going to go to the corner. We may get turned over, we may get stopped, but we're going to go for it. We have the energy now. We need to score tries. We know we need to score tries. We have gone the last 2 years in this tournament without registering a point on the table. Like 4-try bonus point could happen if you go for tries, but kicking 3-pointers in the first quarter when you only score 3 times in a game, it just makes no sense.
You're
to
probably
me.
Right about that. I know that's a constant bugbear of yours, but
you're away in Twickenham. You're by far the underdog team. The only winning picture you have is you catch them cold and go 21-0 up, and then hold on for dear life. And then when you're 21-0 up, kick 3-pointers. You're gassed anyway. As soon as you have a sniff, then you kick your 3-pointers. You're holding on to a score, but you're not building a score with 3-pointers. England just won't fear that.
On defence, obviously, few key work-ons. The one we keep harping on is tackle completion percentage. Committing to tackles. The technique is not great.
It's not just the main point.
There's commitment issues going on,
especially in the third quarter when the game's gone.
Harping back to that Xander Fagerson try that Scotland scored when the game was
in the
in the
Automations Cup, wasn't it?
Last autumn, when he just caught the ball. It looked like it might have been a dead play, but then the Italian just watched him.
Two of them watched them go between him because they thought, was that not knock on? And it's like, play the whistle, guys, come on.
Likewise last week, I know Teddy Thomas is elusive, but when he gets the ball and he dances through about 7 of them, and 1 or 2 of those tackles in particular are just so lightweight. Those kind of things just they can't afford. And then the other thing is keeping their shape, and that goes back to the sort of staying in the moment dynamic, next play dynamic. Like sometimes when they're just going, but when they've fallen behind, they stop communicating, their heads fall down, and they just leave open spaces. And you look at the reaction to the French line break for the first try, the Cretin try. Like France get to the 1 metre line, and Italy all but give them the try from there. They don't work around the corner. They don't really hustle enough. They don't make it difficult for France. I know Dupont is tricksy, but they don't slow the ball up once. They don't make. They
don't even give away a penalty.
No.
Why aren't you giving away a penalty?
There and then.
You kill the play.
You don't get the impression from them that they're desperate not to concede when they get down there. You get the impression that they're like,
they're all used to conceding. They're
exactly.
too used to conceding. They just conceded 50 points at home and were praised for the performance.
That's
not good.
That's the so they are a young team. There are shoots of optimism, but until they enforce a bit of discipline and a real element of just sort of grit and playing
which
for the
you
jersey.
see from Benetton. Benetton is the glimmer of hope, because even though Benetton haven't won many games this season, and that's they probably should have won a bit more.
You get the sense that the players are living and dying for the jersey. Though. They're
and
not
you're forcing
easy.
a team like Munster to have to kick a last minute goal to win the game. Like every tough.
Your opponent might be better than you, but you're not going to give them anything. You're going to be so miserly. You're not giving away penalties. You're not giving away cheap meters on the inside. If you want to beat us, you're going to have to go out and beat us. And I think that's got to be an attitude that they work in, as well as the free-flowing stuff on offense, which is grand. They do need to work a bit of grit, and that's the word, isn't it? Grit.
It's grit, and they haven't shown any thus far, and it definitely is a work on for them. Also just essentially develop more grit, but also stop doing your opponent's work for you as well. That's like a main thing. Like too many tries against Italy, it feels like Italy scored that try. Penalty, crashed over from 3 meters, and it's like, what did France even do, or what did Ireland even do, or
Yeah.
England even do? Or, like, you're too used to watching it.
Yeah.
Stop doing their
Make
work
them
for
make
them.
the play at the
Indeed.
very least.
At the very least is right. So then, with all that said, I suppose we should look at predictions. What do you think might happen?
It's interesting. Like, scoreline prediction is almost less interesting than just whether England will attack. That's what I'm curious to see. Is like,
that's the story of the
will
game.
Eddie Jones be bullish and just stick to his
Kicking.
the only kick?
Because I think it'll work. I think Italy will panic.
It'll work today.
It
It won't work going forward.
No.
And I think it could come back to bite them, like, in a big way. But yeah, that's the big dynamic for me.
Will we see Slade's passing game?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing.
that
That's the
kind of
thing you
question.
want to see. But like, as far as the scoreboard, I think I think it's obvious to everybody that Italy aren't on the same level as the other 5 teams, and England, like the other 5, like the rest of the teams, will record a bonus point win at the very least. And like, even if they do kick the leather off the ball, they're going to be given easy entrances. What I expect is a bit of a response from them. I expect them to keep the ball
there's
in hand a
the
bit
bounce
more.
back ability thing as well. There's
Yeah.
kind of Italy are teed up for a bit of a revenge tonking, which normally happens when a team of the caliber of England suffer a home defeat the week before. It's not good for Italy's chances at all. But
I think if you have for anyone who's doing fantasy, I think your man Odogwu, the uncapped winger, could be a bolter you throw in.
Might be,
Just that's my tip. I don't even do it, but that's my tip. I just think they might throw him into the starting team, and they might get him on the ball, and he might be they might try and add a bit of zip and a bit of spark, and generate some confidence, even if they don't look necessarily slick or perfect. I suspect they'll develop a bit of confidence by running up a score here against Italy. So I'm going to say England 55 to 19. To 12. 55 to 12.
55 to 12,
19. Go back to 19. They will get a late try. 55
nice.
to 19.
Like,
3 tries for Italy in that 19.
Lovely. That's what I want to see.
No points.
That's what I want to see.
3 tries. They'll be close to the 4 tries that you're asking for. But 55-19.
I would love that. I would love to see it. That's my dream prediction. Now, that being said, I think it'll probably be about 42 to 9. 3 pointers for me to stew over, and they kicked the third
9 all
one
at half time.
Maybe it could be anything all at half time. They're still going to concede all those points in the last half, in the second half. I think England will score slightly fewer points than France, but will still rack up the bonus point, and Italy will maybe score a try, but probably not, to be honest. I think England's defence is probably
I think their
tougher.
attack is getting better, and I think England might play looser, and I think they might make a couple of changes which will leave them disjointed. And you know what? Garbisi is going to get a couple of assists, and they are going to get a few tries in a 55 to 19 defeat.
Okay, let's see what happens on the weekend. With that, we will move on.
Absolutely. Yes, so our next game, the middle game of the weekend, is Scotland against Wales, taking place in Murrayfield this Saturday evening. 4:45 kickoff, Greenwich Mean Time, local time as well. Refereed by Matthew Carley.
Right.
Weather set to be cold, a bit windy, some chance of snow up in Edinburgh.
Yes.
Proper winter rugby, but not too inhibiting, all things considered. I think France is the one with the bum weather this weekend.
Yeah, Sunday the worst if it's expected to roll in, but it's still Edinburgh, and it's still February, so it can be a bit miserable. But these two teams being where they are, they're kind of used to conditions like this.
It's not going to be too inhibiting, but it is winter rugby, and that's still a factor here. This game takes on enormous significance in the wake of last week. Two sides who both pulled off upset victories, and will be bullish about their chances of winning here and setting up a Triple Crown decider, for both teams. Scotland looking at a couple of home games away from a Triple Crown. They haven't won a Triple Crown since, I believe, 93.
Right.
And Wales, obviously, more routine Triple Crown winners than that. But a win here would really set them up, and they almost have muscle memory when it comes to winning these Grand Slams once they get a head of steam up. And while that does seem a far-fetched notion now, given just the state of the team, a win here would be making them feel very, very good.
Momentum's such a factor in tournaments like this, and in this tournament in particular, and both of them are riding a bit of a momentum wave into this clash on Saturday. So I expect some fireworks. It's definitely, both teams will be up for it. It's very different for Scotland, who have definitely been the more impressive of the two over the last kind of year and a half, really. They've been growing. They've built a very robust pack. They now have Finn back. They're their primary 10. They have some key danger men out wide. Stuart Hogg's form looking fantastic as well. Really good set piece, and just a really well balanced team. What they are not used to and unaccustomed to is the favourites tag, and they traditionally do not wear it well. It'll be a different thing, as opposed to being backs to the wall. You all doubted us going to Twickenham. It's no one's doubting you now. We kind of expect you to beat Wales because you look better than them. And that can be tough. It's a
different mindset.
Especially after such an emotional pitch of a game last week when you're beating England for the first time in however many years in Twickenham. That's a very emotional game, and there can be a bit of an adrenaline dump the week after. We see it with Ireland a lot of the time after big emotionally charged performances. That and the fact that the Welsh are used to beating Scotland in prickly little games as well. They do it very often.
Yeah, it's that horrible combination of a tough game that they should win, that they need to win. And in terms of like Scotland, when they took that drop goal on towards the end of the game, it told me that they were thinking on a macro scale about the tournament as well as everything else. They didn't just want to run out the clock. They ran it out to a minute, and then they were like, might fancy a pot shot here, taking this out to 8 points. Now the pass kind of took it away from Finn Russell, and chances are in the way he's not knocking that over anyway. But it didn't happen that way. But it is interesting that they were thinking on that level, trying to take the losing bonus from England and work an edge that way. This is like, from that point of view, it's definitely a different mindset for them. I think they're bullish. I think they want to be bullish. You know, heading into the World Cup, I remember them talking about wanting to win the competition. They weren't as a team at all in a place to do that, and they ended up looking silly. They've been more quiet and more impressive since then.
That's right.
But they know they have a good team, and they do have a good team, and they want to get out of their own way and put it all together. And from that point of view, it'll be very interesting to see. It'll be a real test of character and a real test of where this side is at. Heading into the next week and heading into the rest of the competition. We're going to learn about Scotland this week, I think.
I expect if it's a tight contest going the distance, I think I do back Scotland as probably the better team right now to nick that. The fear is if you arrive for the first 20 minutes not really dialed into the game, and suddenly like the quick PVAC offense yields 2 tries and then you're chasing it. And you don't want that. You don't need that.
One thing about the Six Nations that's true is just the difference between the best team and the worst team that isn't Italy tends to not be that big.
No,
like
a few mistakes, a few moments.
If you don't show up at the pitch, you're going to be caught. And that's the test for Scotland. From Wales's point of view, you know, last week
they got the win. They against the 14 men of Ireland, but they got the win they desperately needed.
Like a couple of tries with no possession, and
it's not a bad stat.
It's not a bad stat. Like the hope for Wales is in the offense, is in the slick handling and the finishing ability of the likes of Reece
tempo
Zammit.
And just the aggressive lines of running they can implement. Especially with like obviously they had more of an attritional game just as far as colour. Like they're going to have to mix things up more than Scotland going into this one in terms of selection, but it feels like they have a team that's built to operate at a good pace, and a pace that can ask questions of pretty much any defence. And Scotland really weren't tested defensively last week as well, so they'll fancy their chances of having a cut at the likes of Redpath, who's new in the jersey and hasn't really had a lot of defending to do just yet. You'd expect Wales to try and take it to them in those kind of areas.
They'll have to. And the other thing is just you know, whether they can withstand what is the ferocity of this Scottish pack. I mean, they were up against a similar animal in Ireland last week, and you know they certainly failed to dominate against 7 forwards, and arguably
Ireland scrummaged with 7 a few times and there was no purchase for this.
Scotland are scrumming aggressively now. They really are
winning penalties in Twickenham.
And being aggrieved that they're not winning enough penalties. Like they really are trying to make a point at the scrum. And so it's on like Wyn Jones, who did have a great game but also worked his hole off last week to stand up and withstand what's coming for them. I mean, that's the other sort of dynamic for Wales. As far as the squads are concerned, it's 2 very polarised scenarios. I mean, Scotland got through their impressive victory against England largely unscathed.
No injury crisis for Scotland.
Didn't have to make too many tackles, and it helps, you know.
Yes, it does.
Outside of Jamie Ritchie, who went off injured, but I believe he's fine. He's been doing media for them. They haven't had any real issues, and I don't expect much in the way of changes. You could see maybe Scott Steele isn't too
good
far
cameo.
away.
Definitely pushing Price, but they seem to be.
Gregor has a lot of faith in Ali Price, rightly or wrongly, and Ali Price is probably the main man going forward. Other potential changes, maybe they'd look to freshen up the pack, except that the pack is such a nice feel to it. You could see them throwing a rogue Gary Graham in there, or maybe
he was good off the bench. But then they carried very robustly. Anyway, Fagerson starting was very good too.
I suspect we're going to look at the exact same 15. I actually think, in spite of how historic in some sense the win was, it wasn't necessarily the most physically challenging. As much as they won the physical battle, they weren't tested too much on a defensive point of view. They didn't have too much in the way of injuries. Really, this game was won at the kicking and the set piece, which are static and without necessarily body breaking
risk. Whereas the same can't be said for Wales. Wales and Ireland both got dealt hefty blows in terms of their campaign going forward, and their squad has had to be bolstered with some new blood. I think Wales, who was it? Dan Lydiard obviously was the first to fall, suffered a very serious injury. He's done his cruciate, another cruciate in this year of cruciate ligaments.
So last year was the year of cruciate ligaments that continues.
I don't know.
Terrible stuff to see so many athletes across so many sports going down with this awful
horrendous injury. And then there were head knocks for Johnny Williams and Hallam Amos as well. Then Thomas Williams, wee scrummy, suffered a damaged hamstring.
He played well as well.
He played pretty well. He set a nice tempo.
I actually thought when Gareth Davis came on, there was a noticeable dip in the tempo of their offense, and the best moments that they had in the first half were when Thomas Williams was driving that tempo. Now Gareth Davis did have some good moments. I thought the wide pass off his left hand he threw for the Reece Sammet try
was a very good pass.
Lovely ball, and he does have those killer plays in him. Obviously, that kick at the end was pretty horrific.
It was. It could have cost them. We were denied that grandstand finish due to an Irish error, but on another day that could have cost them, and it could have been the narrative. But he's still available and will probably start, given that hamstring tweak to Thomas Williams.
But tempo setting, obviously, that's a blow.
There was a new one today as well, just as we're shooting this. It's Wednesday evening, but apparently George North now is unavailable for the weekend as well. Having suffered, I think, an eye poke of some kind.
It was an eye poke. there was nothing deliberate about it.
No, it was a very dynamic kind of moment in the game, and he did cop one, and then he was wearing a bit of a shiner by the end, and it seems to have been a bit more than a shiner, because
I saw some angry Welsh fans calling it a gouge. It wasn't.
No, it was a slap in the eye, a dynamic moment.
People do have to be realistic about these things. I know a finger in the eye gets people's goat, but I mean, it was totally an accidental collision. It would be as ridiculous to sanction Henshaw for that as it would be to sanction Tipperick for the fact that his knee hit Sexton's head, and that's why Sexton had to leave the field. I mean, it was just an incidental collision, but it was a knee to the head, but it was a finger in the eye. Doesn't matter.
Context is key.
It was an accidental collision, but a nasty one, and unfortunate for North, who had a very up and down game last week.
He had some terrible moments, but did grab a nice try.
Yeah, he was threatening. He was threatening as a runner, and he always is threatening as a runner. And they're definitely weaker for that. And it means they're going to have some big, big selection headaches going into this weekend. I mean, it's a bare bones squad. I mean, the centre is good. Both centres are going to be unavailable more than likely unless Johnny Williams and co can pass the concussion protocols. But you're likely looking at Owen Watkin and Nick Tompkins. No Jonathan Davis, no Johnny Williams.
Look.
George North. Completely new look to it. Watkins been out of favour for some time. Nick Tompkins came in last year. I actually thought his cameo at the weekend was actually pretty good.
Yeah, he looked dynamic, didn't he?
He made a defensive play. Yeah. I was like, Nick Tompkins made a defensive play.
He was a young man when they threw him in there. There's still we don't know his ceiling yet, because he's still growing as a player.
Raw talent, speed.
Yeah, he's had some lovely touches as well.
Could even work a lot better than George North, just because the soft hands he has as well.
Yeah, can reach the extremities of a defensive line, many defences in the Six Nations are tending towards the narrow side. So having a distributing option and a pacey guy in the centres could be an accidental kind of gem, potentially.
He's exciting in that way. The other options, it's curious to see what they do in the back row. I think the obvious option is just Navidi straight in,
considering how well he played as well.
With Wainwright covering on the bench. There's been some murmurings in Wales that just didn't turn over enough ball. As well as Tipperick plays and as well as Navidi plays. actually Faletau had a poor game, which might have been the missing link in that back row, but they just didn't offer a jackal threat all game.
Yeah, where usually that had been an MO. You have Lydia chopping, and then either Warburton or whoever over the years has been in over the top. And to be fair, like, normally you do see that more from them. They seem content to kind of use tackling.
I think it's a tactical thing, and I think it's probably one that they're going to need to look at.
Yeah,
because their jackling is so important.
And
but
you need to slow the Scots down as well. Whether you succeed in affecting the turnover or not, you need to give messy ball to Finn Russell to work with, as opposed to clean, quick ball, because that's going to be a recipe for stopping the Scots.
Totally. Yeah. Although, like, from my point of view, I still think, in Tipperick, in Ken Owens, in Alan Wynne Jones, they have the personnel there who should be able to jackal if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So I don't think they need to change any personnel there, and I don't think they will. They've enough enforced changes not to be tinkering with a pretty as good a pack as they can field at the moment.
Yeah. So just in terms of who's called up, then I know James Botham, Lloyd Williams, and the uncapped Willis Halaholo are actually called into the squad in the wake of all those injuries as well.
The bare bones nature of that backline means that Halaholo might get a place on the bench as well.
That's potential thing, because he can cover a few positions as well. Yeah, they're bolstered with a bit more talent, but obviously took a hit. It's not ideal to have injuries in week one, but it does happen. Such is the nature of this tournament. But yeah, that kind of does it for the squads. We'll move into just what the teams are looking to do now, and we're going to start as we do with the home side. That's Scotland. And yeah, what are they looking to do with the ball? I guess last week we saw a pretty momentous and historic occasion for them, and a moment in Scottish rugby history, which was a pleasure to watch as Six Nations fans that we are. But this game, as we said, there's a potential for them to arrive in a bit sluggish if they're not focused on the process. If they're a little bit off, they could get caught. So they need to stick to that process, trust themselves, and arrive to play.
Respect Wales and earn the right to go Finn Russelling.
Yes,
as well.
indeed. Like, don't do it from minute one.
Yeah, I think like it's got to be about imposing themselves physically and winning those inside battles.
That's what it was about last week.
Yeah. And all of their wins last year. I mean, their pack is mighty impressive when it performs as a unit. Their set piece looks rock solid, and then like in Hamish Watson, they have a truly world-class back row, and on his day Johnny Gray, truly world-class lock as well. And even guys I was calling out like Scott Cummings, I thought had a fantastic game.
He did.
I thought George Turner coming in at hooker was a revelation.
Brilliant.
Matt Fagerson likewise at 8, just winning contacts.
Yeah.
That's the kind of bullish play that you want to see from Scotland. And Wales, at times against Ireland, whenever Ireland got consistent possession, especially in that second quarter with 14 men, it was just like a 10 to 15 minute period where Ireland had the ball and their defence couldn't deal with it. They were giving away penalties. They gave away a very soft try.
Yeah.
They don't like consistently tackling when they don't have that poached threat. If Scotland maintain their discipline and the offensive breakdown and retain possession and move the ball, especially when they've got a guy like Russell just winning contact, forcing the soak tackles out of Wales, the space will arrive.
Yeah, they should. They seem to have a better equipped team than Ireland had to attack them that way.
Yeah,
and if they have all 15 of their men, even better. Because the Welsh defensive line currently, and to be honest, all throughout Wayne Pivac's tenure, has been pretty unimpressive. Has been a little bit lackluster. Some of their contacts haven't been good. So yeah, you'd expect this Scotland team to use their distributing assets that they have to move them about and ask those questions of them. And foundationally speaking, it's all based on the set piece. This Scotland team, that's what they were doing last year when they didn't have Finn Russell. It's what they should still be building on, especially at home in Murrayfield in a winter game. You want to get your scrums right, you want to get your lineouts right, you want to make theirs a mess and play the game that way. They did that
so well last week. They did that so well. So I do expect them to be aggressive in those areas. I expect them to try and maul off lineouts. I expect them to try and win penalties off scrums. And then the other thing, obviously, once they get that go for it ball, is the distribution of Finn Russell. And I think, the disruption Wales have in the centre, and Nick Tompkins, who makes some defensive plays but is a very young soul.
And he's an offensive. It's a centre, really.
And trying to make plays by shooting out of line. I mean, that is what Finn Russell eats up for breakfast. Yeah. So I do expect them to just try and gain the initial advantage with the physical carries, but then getting Finn on the ball with a little bit of space, trying to work Nick Tompkins and trying to get a read off him.
Yeah.
I think the best thing that you can do against Finn Russell is get a read on where the space is and try and fill that area, because he's always looking to try and find the space with his passing game.
True. Yeah.
But if Tompkins shoots out and tries to cut off a pass,
we've seen that's before.
That's where the danger comes.
Skipping over his head.
Any number of ways to exploit that.
Yeah.
And I do expect them to do that. And then they've got such talent in the outside channels with Hogg and even Maitland looking brilliant for the first time in so long, looking brilliant last week.
He had his best performance that I can remember in many moons. He was the best performing Sarri of any of the Sarris we saw in action as well. Actually, he looked sharp.
Maybe he needed a break of all of them.
Yeah.
And then Duhan van der Merwe, obviously there are no words needed. Phenomenal.
Lethal. 6'4", 118 kilos, taking tries that really he shouldn't need. It's a him v2 and he's scoring it. That's good wingering.
Like 6'4" and that weight, and yet he's stronger than he looks.
Yeah,
that's the kind of bizarre thing.
Yeah.
Like he's a ferocious animal, and getting him in space is definitely a recipe for goodness. Like I said, they have a very balanced team. The kicking game is where they won it last week. It's not to be overstated. I think we saw on exit when Ireland had James Lowe doing exit kicks against Wales, it worked really well. He just sat in the pocket, pumped it deep. Wales did not respond particularly well.
I think it's going to catch it. Like it is the recipe, the antidote to England, but I think a lot of teams are just sitting expecting the box kicks and sitting a little shallower.
A lot of teams copied what England do off restarts, trying to pin teams back. A lot of teams have been using that as their MO, and that's a good way to escape it, especially if you notch up a 3-pointer and then can instantly get back in opposition territory. It's great.
That's your only goal when you score a 3-pointer is exit.
There was one where Lowe literally hammered it into the in goal for a 22 dropout, and then from there they launched an attacking set, and that's got to be something Scotland look at. Like, literally hit it into the in goal, let them kick a 22 dropout, they'll chip it to you and work from there.
Yeah.
Because there is scope to attack from around the halfway line.
And the in goal is nice and big in Murrayfield as well, isn't it? So there's very little risk as far as kicking it dead.
Yeah, exactly. So hammer the ball deep into their half when you're in your own half. Aim for the in goal almost. Obviously don't kick it too far.
Yeah.
But if you're Stuart Hogg, get that long spiral going. Likewise Finn Russell, hammer that ball deep and then launch off the returning kick, which is usually around the halfway line, and from there a couple of nice movements. And we saw it last week. We saw like Ali Price was getting pulverised on the box kicks by Maro Itoje, and then they made the adjustment, and there was one sequence which was lovely where he dummied the box kick and Itoje was ready to charge down and just went right
wide and actually
space. Russell linked with Redpath, who broke through the line, linked up with Hogg, who linked up with Maitland, and all of a sudden they found themselves in the halfway line.
Beautiful exit.
That was an excellent exit, but also just trying those little moves from the halfway line, probing at this inexperienced Welsh defence, using that Finn Russell passing game and that power, being patient and working them that way. I think it could be stellar for them.
And it involves like obviously building on the guys like Hamish Watson and like Fagerson want to find at number 8, these big ball carrying forwards. You want them on the game, on the ball early and often in the early exchanges, and creating that quick clean ball. Like when they get 2 second rucks, 1 second, 2 second rucks going, they look very, very good. Very, very good. It's when you're getting the 5 and 6 second rucks that you may as well not have a Finn Russell there, because you don't need.
I don't think it's long before Finn Russell clicks as well, and I think
their offense didn't fully, like, they grabbed a great try last week and the winning try and the worthy credit. They weren't on their A game offensively last week. It feels like there's more in the tank, which is such an exciting prospect for this Scotland team.
That's the key. Like, really, if they can put together a nice offensive performance where they are clinical, and I think they do have the weapons to do that. They have a lovely balance to their back line. Could be an exciting day for them going forward. From a defensive point of view, dealing with that Welsh attack is an interesting one for them. Likewise with the offensive game, it's everything starts with being bullying and being physical up front and not giving away anything cheap on the inside. But you do have to be mindful of Wales's passing game, which was excellent last week.
It's true.
And they have very, very good wingers. Obviously Liam Williams coming back in.
That changes the aerial aspect of it as well. You can't the bombs are less of an option even still.
That's why I think that the box kick really should be retired for this team, because Ali Price struggled so much with it.
He's not a good box kicker either.
No, they're putting themselves under pressure with it. They did make the adjustment last week, and they need to stick with it. Like, when Hogg can kick the ball like 80 metres, there's just no need at all for them to be box kicking. So I'd like to see them move past that. I would think so as well. They have other resources, and it makes no sense when Liam Williams is on the team opposite you as well. It just play to your strengths, don't play into theirs. Bigger as well is a pretty rock solid operator under the high ball. So mix it up, go deeper, find and kick for grass when you're exiting. And I think they have got that message. And in terms of just defending them, limiting the time that Liam Williams has in the ball, limiting the time that Rhys Sammet has in the ball, that's key. And what that involves is, obviously inside you want to be robust, you want to get in their face. Wales are a team that plays a lot off 9. You saw it last week, very little play off 10 until they get into the red zone, in which case, but even then, the 9 is making the killer pass, and then it's just attempting to get quick hands and move the ball out to the wing. don't bite in. That was one thing that Ireland did that was massively frustrating for both tries. Well, the second one mainly, but on a couple of breaks as well. Just, I think it was James Lowe just biting in for no reason when Halfpenny was the guy giving the last pass.
Yeah.
And it's like, drift off him, let Halfpenny make the run. He's going to make the pass, but he's not going to make the run to score the ball from there. Your inside man's going to get him. So just man marking the danger players on that Welsh team, who are going to be those wingers. So if you're Duhan van der Merwe, don't shoot in. Stick on your winger. Make Wales make the play on the inside. Keep your width. And keep the wingers out of the game and force Wales to attack on the inside where they're weaker.
Yes.
And that's the key. Like, Wales are going to be trying to get around you.
Yeah.
You've got to not let that happen and force them narrow.
Yeah, it'll be a big test, as I've alluded to before, for that fledgling centre partnership that looked so good with ball in hand. Have yet to see them really tested because England didn't really go there. But as you say, Wales will likely be looking for the extremities. Big task for Harris at 13, as it always is for a 13. But similarly, Redpath at 12. Fresh into the jersey, it'll be a different tempo of game. There'll be more asked of them, and they need to be cohesive as a unit and shut that down.
They need to keep their width. To keep their width
for sure. And then I suppose
on deal with the kicking game. That's the other thing. I expect Wales to be launching bombs as much as they played off 9 last week. I expect them to make the adjustment, and I'll be disappointed if they don't. With Liam Williams being bigger in the team, they should be trying to test as good as Hogg played last week. They should be kicking more accurately to test him with bombs.
Himself and Maitland and Van der Merwe all need to be sharp.
Winning those battles,
and they need to field the high balls. No casual drops, because that's just the in that these teams are looking for. That's really the task at hand for Scotland. When you're looking at Wales, then I suppose it's a different equation. You're going up to Murrayfield against a team very favoured. You did get the vital win last week, but if you're really honest with yourselves, and they probably are, and even Alan Wynn's post-match interview had a little tinge of like he knew they could have lost that game.
How deep do the problems in this team run?
That's the question.
And can momentum alone put them to bed?
For them, there's potential for it. They are such a momentum team. Historically, they've done Grand Slams and then back them up with wooden spoons. They're the team that does that. They can flip on a dime. So they will take a lot of heart and a lot of momentum from that victory last week into this fixture, and they'll fancy it. They've got good memory banks of beating this Scotland team, and they'll fancy having a go at them and then teeing up a Triple Crown and maybe more should they get that win. From an offensive point of view, when they have the ball, they need to do basically what England didn't do. Ask some questions, keep the ball in the hand, set some tempo off 9, and really try and test this Scotland
and when
defense.
they did that against Ireland, they did yield meters. When the ball is quick, they can be lethal. They do have excellent hands. They pick nice runs. I think Tompkins can be absolutely lethal when he gets on the ball.
It's also true of even when you're looking at their domestic sides, some of them aren't of the caliber. Like Dragons are a weak enough side. But when a line break happens, they're pretty good at adjusting and grabbing tries. Even Dragons, they look good with ball in hand on a club level all the way up to this, and it's something that PVAC has tried to introduce to them. Even last year, you saw glimpses of it. Some of the tries they scored last year, even in losing efforts, were beautiful.
Last week, just working Tipperick onto the ball as well. Like his passing game so crisp and so clean, and likewise Alan Wynne-Jones. They've done a really great job of putting those guys into the midfield and into the wide channels, and
where they can have an influence.
Because they're threats on the ball. Like Tipperick especially, you have to mind him from a defensive point of view. And if you have Tipperick and Tompkins and Liam Williams lining up in one channel, they're all threats on the ball. They're all quick. They'll all go if you leave them. So they're dangerous, and they've got the quality to exploit where the space is and to make the quick passes if need be. Those are the kind of pictures they want to work. They want to be fluid, quick, and getting wide, and then working their best playmakers on the ball to try and find the space and find the score. And they did a good job of that last week in a limited circumstance. What was very poor about what they did last week was everything that happened when they weren't in the opposition 22.
They didn't find entries.
No,
other than errors.
Dan Biggar was a non-factor, and it was all about Thomas Williams and then Gareth Davis's kicking game.
And I just which is crazy because neither of them are stellar kickers of the ball, whereas Biggar is. And I expect that to change, as we were saying from a Scotland point of view. If you flip it, you have Liam Williams back available to you. You have Dan Biggar at 10. those are two aerial aficionados. They're going to try and test Scotland in that area with kicks from various positions.
That's how they get entry. Like that has always been how these Welsh teams get entry into attack, and that's how you generate a bit of tempo. Is you put up a bomb, but Biggar's a more accurate kicker than Davis is, or whoever they go with at 9.
Yeah.
Whether it be Hardy or anyone, they're all very much of the same mold.
They are.
Little Lloyd Williams who's come in.
Yeah.
It's very similar kind of players. Zippy, tempo filled. No problem with those guys dictating the play in the offense. I like Biggar as an offensive player, but he can play second fiddle to a tempo setting 9.
Yeah,
that's fine. But in the kicking game, Biggar needs to take over.
Yeah,
and he needs to put big. Not like the tame kicks that Farrell was putting in, where he just chipped it down for Hogg to kick back, but big contestable kicks. Like Hogg, whatever happens, Hogg's not returning with a kick because he's having to feel the ball in traffic.
Yes, that's ideal.
Ideally under pressure from either Biggar himself or Williams
or someone else.
Someone along those lines, trying to make a play. And then when you do make the play on the ball, you take it to a breakdown and then it's quick. Then Scrummy's there, then we're working the ball. All of a sudden, Tipperick and Alan Wynne-Jones are in the wide channels. Louis Sammett's in a bit of space. Those are the kind of pictures.
roaming as well. All of these guys are dangerous.
Yeah, they've got great footballers.
Yeah.
They're not as big as Scotland, but they can be quicker than them, and they can be more wily than them.
Yeah.
And they have to be. They have to play much, much better in the middle of the park than what they did last week. And then I think the offense in the opposition 22 is pretty stellar.
Yeah, I would agree. Like certainly their conversion rate was probably the best of the weekend just gone, in terms of they had 2 chances, took 2 tries. Maybe France, but France let a couple go away towards the end of the game as well. In terms of like it's always a tougher task from when you're playing Italy as well. But yeah, no, very impressive in terms of their clinicality. They just need to find their entries a bit more efficiently. And they'll know that themselves. They're a pretty wise team at this point. They'll be recognising what they did a bit wrong. They'll be grateful for the win and happy with the win and take the momentum and the positives that they can. And they'll know what they need to work on as well. So yeah, the performance of the 9 is obviously very important to any Welsh side. We'll see how they go this time in terms of, are they setting the tempo? Are they getting clean ball? Because if they're losing collisions, they won't be getting clean ball, and then they won't be getting tempo. So it's a big job for them to get over the advantage line and then use their ball efficiently. And then defensively, it's a bigger task, I think, because you have to deal with obviously Finn Russell's distribution, which is a nightmare for any defensive team, especially one a bit short of confidence as this one is. It doesn't feel like they're cohesive. They're probably going to have new centres as well, so it's even less cohesion. It's very tough to be organised in a line, but they need to be. They need to be bringing line speed and ferocity and try and shut them down.
Yeah.
But then also, like, defending the set piece is going to be pivotal for this Welsh team, because that is what they're doing. They're defending the set piece. Yeah. They lost a few line-outs against Ireland last week, which is unlike them.
The worst in Europe in the Autumn Nations Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of things that are unlike them are just becoming like them in last year under Pivac, and it's definitely a worrying trend.
Yeah. When you have a guy like Alan Wynne-Jones in there calling your line out, it shouldn't look as shaky as it is, and Ken Owen's back in as well. Maybe a bit of ring rust is to explain some of them, but they'll really want to set things right on their own set piece in that one. And then the scrum is one where I think they're up against it. Up in Murrayfield against a dynamic. It's got to
take some wiliness. Scrum is an 8, scrum super compact, like Ireland did against them last week, and then just force Scotland to force the issue, because that's where an area where Scotland are extremely naive is that they scrum for penalties even when they're not there, and at times you can see Rory Sutherland slip to the ground because he's too aggressive.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of pictures you want to paint, but it's a massive job.
Yeah.
In the tight head shirt. Who has that tight head shirt at the moment? Leon Brown is coming on at the moment for. Let me just remind myself, it's not Dylan Lewis. Of course, it's Exeter lad, Thomas Francis.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, proper job for him handling Rory Sutherland and likewise Wynne-Jones, who gets through just an enormous amount of work.
Head, it's pretty crazy. His engine's pretty impressive.
He was top carries, top tackles. He was well, maybe not top tackles, but he had a lot of tackles and a huge amount of carries. He was pretty much hitting every hit up. It was just Wynne-Jones, and he was dominating most of them.
It's a lot to ask for back-to-back performances of that caliber from a loose head prop.
Yeah, but Scotland are going to work him in the scrum.
They will a bit more so probably.
So he's probably going to have to be more of a set piece and less of a loose play influence on the game.
Indeed.
But yeah, from a defensive point of view, just locking that down will be a result. And likewise, just against the big pack that Scotland were bringing, somebody needs to step up and do the Lydiate job. I mean, for 10 minutes they did a great job of containing the Irish attack with CJ Stander and the boys trying to rumble through them with some great Lydiate chop tackling.
and then he obviously fell by the
then
wayside.
he left the field and they just started soak tackling in large parts.
They did.
They figured it out to some extent in the second half. They maintained their discipline little better than they had done in the first half.
Yeah.
But Ireland were very rudimentary, and Scotland are more multi-dimensional than Ireland at the moment.
It's true. They have more ways of scoring. They have more
physical.
Yeah,
just as physical. So it's a tougher task, and it involves getting out of the line and making.
Yeah,
good
you
tackles.
need to upset their. You can't let them establish any rhythm. Like
Yeah.
an arrhythmical game forcing it to be an arrhythmical game will do a lot to discourage this Scotland team. Like you want
forcing them into kicking it, making them
Yeah.
doubt themselves in the halfway line, and it involves contesting the pill a bit as well.
It does. Probably more like that was what was called for based on last week. There was very little jackal threat despite all the tackles made. Like, it doesn't have to be jackling to contest the ball. You can target the ball in contact with a swinging arm towards it when you're going in for the tackle, or you can do the hold up, get kind of soak tackle and then into a choke tackle and then a turnover for a scrum. They're pretty good at that, so particularly the likes of Alan Wynne-Jones and even Tipperick have been good at that particular skill.
They worked it pretty well
Isolating
actually
Scotsmen.
when they played Scotland last year in the windy game. It was a couple of times in the red zone they turned them over by holding them up, because Scotland as a unit carry pretty high.
They do, and they fight for their feet. They fight for extra meters. Yeah, so you can kind of, if you can paint a false picture of like, oh, this is a soft shoulder, but it's not actually, because there are two reinforcements coming in and now it's a trap.
Yeah. That's what you talk about being wily. That's what Wales have been so good at historically. But new coaches in there, they haven't really shown it so far.
No, they haven't.
They're gonna have to bring some of that wiliness.
No, if they're to win the game, they have to be the wiser team. They have to catch a Scotland a little off the pace. Probably a little impatient. You have to force the issue. Get the ball. If you take the lead and then suddenly they're panicking, you want to force panic decisions from them and be the calm presence on the field. That's got to be Wales's winning picture.
Slow up the ball as well on halfway, and then Finn Russell's going to try something. He's always a danger. Patience is required from the 13 channel. I was talking about this little when we were talking about Scotland, but if you're Nick Tompkins defending that 13 channel, a couple of players have been able to get the better of Finn Russell's wide passing game in recent times, simply by making the read on where he's passing to, wandering into the space, not ball watching and not man watching, just sort of seeing where the space is and where he's going to pass it and getting into that channel. That's definitely key. Likewise, just covering the space he wants to pass the ball, having a scrum half in behind covering the chip, and then having the back three sort of cover cross-field kick options, and leave him with not a lot there. And then if Bigger's up in the line, I know he spends some of his time at fullback, but if he's up in the line,
if he's defending at fullback, do you use either Navidi or Tipperick are both pacey operators in the back row? Pressure Finn. Bring line speed in Finn's face and force him to make those decisions quickly.
He'll try a grubber that's not on or something like that, and it can be an easy turn. It can be an easy turnover.
To be honest, it even starts earlier than that. You can't allow 2-second rooks for Scotland. That's the key. Like if they're getting 2 consecutive 2-second rooks, Finn's going to have clean ball and he's going to have the time to find the space, and his recognition of space is so good, and he has the skill set to execute and find it so often that you really have to make it not even about him by disrupting things even further early in the chain.
They didn't do a great job of that against Ireland. They soaked tackles, they didn't compete, they left a lot of easy quick.
No, they were fortuitous. They were up against a team that are not very clinical with the ball that they have.
Yeah, I mean you can always, like, it's one of Ireland have almost had a patent on making opposition defences look like world beaters for the last couple of years. It's a recurring narrative, and you can fool yourself looking at stats going, geez, only 40% of possession and we only conceded 16, one try. Geez, that's quality from our defence, but there were vulnerabilities there that Ireland just didn't exploit, and they have to be careful in that department, and they have to improve in that department if they want to win this game. Yeah,
and go forward into the tournament as well. Both teams need to improve if they're going to take this contest and then go even further. With all that said, geez, how do you see this one going?
This is good.
Corker, isn't it?
This is a fun game. It's a fun game. I'm unsure what I expect. I'm never right about these things. I missed 2 out of 3 last week, as most people did. It's hard to know which way it's going to go. I always lean on, when I don't know the answer, who I think is the better rugby team, and that's Scotland for me, hands down. I think they're I really do think that it's going to take a heroic performance from Wales or a dreadful one from Scotland where they recede into themselves. To make it not go that way.
I've seen both of those before.
Of course you have. Of course you have. It's entirely possible. This is why it's a tough decision. But I think Scotland are poised to make the step up. We called them last week. We called them the nearly men.
Yeah,
they definitely seem to be approaching just the nearly men, and maybe who knows, if they win this game, they're going to set up a Triple Crown decider, and it's just a phenomenal opportunity to get some silverware. And I think this time they might not let it pass them by.
Scotland are going to do it.
Yeah, I just think they're a better team, much better pack, much better set piece.
Usually, if you're going to the old adage, the forwards win games, that kind of thing, it should be Scotland, judging on all things.
Yeah, the only thing is they aren't clinical, and Wales are, and that could be the difference. On another day, that could be the difference. Like, Scotland could own the game as they did against England, but only have a 5-point return to show for it, and then Wales, it's gone. So they have to be more clinical. But I'm going to predict they are more clinical. I'm going to predict they boss the game and win it, 20 points to 11, something like that. 9-point win. 9-point
win for Scotland. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that they boss most of the game and cough it up at the last minute. I'm going to say a 2-point win for Wales.
Sneaking it and
sneaking that dagger right into the Scottish hearts.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, you can see it. I can see
this game going myriad different ways, and that's what's great about Six Nations rugby. And this clash is always a great one. They're such bitter rivals, but it's a friendly kind of bitterness, and it often produces good games. And both of them going in off wins means that whoever comes out the better side of it is going for the Triple Crown. That doesn't happen every year. It's an exciting dynamic too. So here's just hoping that it presents a great show for Saturday night in terms of the rugby that we see.
Absolutely.
Okay, we will move on.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, and our final weekend fixture comes on Sunday. It features our own vested interest as well. It's Sunday, 14th February, 3:00 kickoff. That's local time and GMT as well. It's going to be in the Aviva Stadium, Dublin. And it is Ireland v France. What a game we have in store. Going to be refereed by Luke Pearce. He'll be the man in the middle with the whistle. And the weather.
Ref, by the way,
I'm
happy
with Luke Pearce.
I think he's the future Wayne Barnes in terms of he's got
does a good
great
job.
demeanour, great read of the game,
very communicative.
Yeah, like a lot about how he dictates the flow of games. And
big controversial decision coming up at the weekend. Then egg on our face.
No, I like.
No, I do like Luke Pearce. Yeah,
the most frustrating thing about him is at times punitive. Not punitive enough at the scrum, not rewarding enough to a dominant scrum. But to be honest, that's true of so many, and he's not the worst in that regard. Good ref, happy to have him.
Yeah, then this is true. The weather is set to be not great at all. There's a wet and windy conditions. It's actually quite cold as it stands right now. There was little petals of snow over the last few days, but that's apparently going to change as of a few days from now, and it's going to be a few degrees warmer, but a bit wetter and a bit windier, and probably some ugly stuff.
If the weather forecast is to be believed, it's going to be near storm force winds with rain and all sorts of badness. So
it could be.
We can always hope
very
that's
wintry.
Wrong.
Hopefully we get a little gap. Sometimes it does happen that way, where it can be a miserable day for either side of the game, but there's a little gap of a couple of hours.
Sometimes Dublin manages to just avoid the worst of what's hitting Ireland as well, just hitting on the east coast here.
Hopefully
sometimes we can get away with it, but it's definitely could potentially be a wet one, and a windy one this weekend, and that could play a massive part in how things go. So it's definitely an interesting one. As far as just the game in general, looking at both teams, Ireland coming off a pretty average year last year, beating the teams they should beat and losing to the teams they should lose to. And then last week's loss puts them in jeopardy of suffering a really tough Six Nations.
Well, their hopes in terms of championship hopes hang by a thread, and that thread will be tested this week when France are coming to town, where they haven't won in ages as far as colours concerned. They haven't had a win in Dublin in quite a long time, but if we're being brutally honest, home advantage isn't really the factor it normally is in this tournament. We saw Scotland record a great away win. We've seen across the board in other sports too that it's not really a factor. It actually, even in the game in Twickenham towards the end, we were musing on the fact that England probably wouldn't have got away with kicking it away for as long as they did if there was a crowd there baying them to not do
attack,
that.
Demanding the attack. Yeah, it definitely is a different dynamic in that way.
Yeah.
From Ireland's point of view, it's their championship hopes hang by a thread, and it's just it in terms of the direction they're going, it's hard to know if there's anything building. the shoots of optimism are in individual performances. They have some stellar players.
They do. Still producing a lot of great players. The club sides are all playing very, very good rugby for the most part, and there's a lot of young talent coming through, bleeding through now.
They have playmakers, and they showed that last week. But it's a big question for them. Can they turn things around and knock off a very fine French team, or are they in a position where they're going to go 0 from 2, look pretty directionless, and then questions are going to be asked of the coaching ticket, and it's just going to be a curiosity as to where they go from here with such a quality team. Even if they manage to turn it around and record 2 or 3 wins,
will that be enough?
Will it be enough, or will it be enough, A, to keep the coaching ticket in town, or B, just to build on something and to build something real in this hotly competitive Test rugby environment? It feels like they're slipping away.
Yeah, well, it's a results-based industry, and coming off a loss is never what you want to be doing, especially in week 1. So yeah, it's very, very tough for Ireland. Obviously, going into this with their backs to the wall, that's where they are. France, on the other hand, coming into this game sitting pretty atop the table after their trouncing of Italy in the sunshine. It'll be a different test here. They definitely will be fancying it in terms of their defence is ferocious. Ireland won't ask as many questions. They beat Ireland not too long ago in that home game in France, which they had targeted because they hadn't beaten Ireland in quite a while, and they did it, and did it very, very well. They have that experience to mine on. They have to go to Dublin, which is another monkey they'll want to get off their backs as well. They're coming here with some genuine belief that they can win, and some kind of aspirations towards going for a Six Nations title, if not a Grand Slam. They're in that good of a form, and they're that good of a team.
No question. However, they haven't won Dublin in 10 years.
That's right.
I look back to last year when they had to play in Murrayfield in tough conditions against a bruising
and in the game they lost.
Scotland team, and they were comfortable losers that day. And it's as well as being an opportunity for them, and as well as them flying high, it's a real test of their mettle. It's a very interesting battle if you're France in terms of where you're at. Actually, as much as you say home advantage doesn't matter.
Oh well, if it's a wet and windy Dublin day, that matters.
It's just different in that regard. And they're playing an Irish team who are in many respects almost have to put out an energy sapping, all out performance this week. They're going to have to play an Irish team on their A game, throwing everything they had into it, where when they played them, as much as Ireland had an opportunity to win the Six Nations when that game kicked off, it was a very sluggish performance. It was a very reactive performance from Ireland. You expect Ireland to be a lot more aggressive this time around.
Try and be proactive.
And so going to Dublin and facing an aggressive, highly motivated Irish team is a proper test for this young French team, and a very interesting one. Given what happened last year at Scotland, can they build on things and put together a mature performance away from home, and hold up defensively and open them up offensively and win the game?
That's what it's got to be about for them. It's definitely interesting. Just from a squad point of view, we made mention of the fact that the Ireland-Wales game was super attritional. Ireland captain Johnny Sexton and lock James Ryan both going through return to play protocols after suffering head knocks. I'd be maybe Sexton will play. He looked the better of the two. James Ryan looked very dodgy on his feet leaving the field last week. It would be surprising to see him kitted out at the weekend, and yet it might happen.
Yes, apparently they're both on course to start, which is interesting. There's a broader discussion to be had around concussion now. That there's Johnny Sexton's doctor coming out and commenting on his situation, saying he shouldn't play. His ex-doctor, I should say, from Racing, from France, deciding to take an interview with media and say that Sexton shouldn't play against France.
There's always that kind of nonsense when we play France.
Profoundly ridiculous, and it seems like they pushed the ball.
Sure, weren't they? They did that with Rowan O'Gara many moons ago in a World Cup as well, didn't they? Call into something into question in match week as well that got him a little tilted. They're all about those.
I think it was gambling with Rowan.
It might have been gambling, something along those lines. There's always those kinds of little subplots.
Subplot or not, it seems crazy that a former doctor of his is going out and commenting to the media about his
what would
condition.
Hippocrates say?
It's a curious one, but I think the broader point is actually, I think the frustrating thing is that they do have a point in that, we've had all this breakthroughs about concussion, and I'm sorry, but James Ryan,
he was rocked.
He was concussed. Is there another word for that? Where a guy gets hit in the head and he can barely walk and he's just hobbling off the pitch holding his head. and then you're telling me, he passed all his tests, he can play 6 days later. Like, it's crazy. It used to be a 3-week break, and it should be a 3-week break, and it would be like it's disconcerting to see James Ryan if he's coming out here. It speaks to a poor treatment of players. It speaks to an outdated system, and it's just mistreatment of a young man, and it's mistreatment of a primary asset, a guy you want to take to the World Cup. You're going to put him at serious risk. So for all kinds of reasons, I kind of hope that we don't see James Ryan. He was clearly concussed. But listen, if they pass the protocols the way it is at the moment, I expect they will throw him in. Yeah, well,
one thing we do know is that Peter O'Mahony will not be available, having got himself red carded in the early exchanges last week, so he is out. Jack Conan has joined the group in Blanchardstown today to kind of bolster them in the wake of that as well. Peter O'Mahony will only return for the England game in the final weekend after that ban. Ryan Baird as well, the young exciting lock that we have coming out of Leinster. He's again training with the squad this week. Ed Byrne as well he provided additional front row cover, I should say, over in Cardiff, and he's also remained with the squad.
Yeah, which makes all the sense in the world. It was bizarre that they had 2 loose heads to begin with.
It seems bizarre now. I think the plan isn't to have Porter switch.
I thought it was when they initially named 2 loose heads.
Now that Furlong's back in the picture, it feels like a rotation of Furlong and Porter is kind of the way forward at tight head, and then using your other, because we do have good loose heads available, including Ed Byrne, who's been in good form in the Pro 14.
They do have interesting selection decisions. Obviously, you guys probably have the selection when this preview video comes out, but we won't. Like a hooker, Ronan Kelleher versus Rob Herring. Kelleher outplayed Rob Herring. He did. Are they going to just lean on the bench? I feel like Kelleher could come in and start. Furlong, I feel like, has to come in and start. Just a phenomenal record against French teams, a brilliant and physical scrummager, just an impossible guy to dominate at scrum time.
Yes. And you may beat him, but you won't dominate him.
And you won't beat him either. Like, he doesn't move backwards. No. He's too hefty. He has great technique and he's too hefty. You just don't shift him, and that'll take a weapon of France's away from them, starting Tighe in a way that starting Porter wouldn't necessarily. And then also his just carry game, especially in the red zone, is just invaluable to Ireland. That'll be an interesting one to see. Obviously, with whether James Ryan plays is his own thing. Ian Henderson, I would love to see them bring Tadhg Beirne into the back row if they can start Ryan. Bringing Tadhg Beirne into the back row wouldn't be the worst thing. Obviously, Tadhg Beirne having to play, given how stellar his performance was. Then there's question marks for me. Where the real question marks come in is obviously the backline as a whole, but mainly halfback. It seems silly to even dwell on it, because we all know in our heart of hearts it's going to be Murray and Sexton. Can't be overstated how poor the two of them were last week. They didn't, in terms of just managing the backline and managing the playmakers around them, they didn't do anything. They didn't generate tempo. They didn't move the ball well. They didn't put others into space. They didn't take the ball to the line. They weren't particularly aggressive. Murray actually was a little better in his performance than Sexton was, in that a couple of occasions he did move blind. He did try and get a read on the defence and work some soft shoulders. Sexton just sat deep and tipped it. Sexton just did a Ross Byrne impression. He looked like a guy who was injured. When Sexton's at his best, he takes the ball to the line. He takes risks with his body. He sucks defenders in and puts other guys through holes. There was none of that.
No.
Ireland's attack was very, very static.
Until the last 5 minutes, when you were looking at a Gibson Park, Billy Burns halfback pairing that was actually moving the ball around.
I would start Billy Burns. I know he had that error last week. I kind of feel like you have to put faith in him, because otherwise you're going to wreck the guy psychologically. I think that's a factor, and I actually don't think that Sexton or Ross Byrne are a preferable option, as bad as his errors were in that occasion. First of all, take the pressure off him. James Lowe's going to be kicking your exits. James Lowe can kick your corners.
Why didn't James?
Other players like Gary Ringrose can step into distribution. Hugo Keenan did a good job stepping into distribution. Your job as the 10 just needs to be take it to the line a bit, shift the ball on, expand the field, get your playmakers onto the ball, and it's something Johnny Sexton's not doing. So I'd love to see them start Billy Burns. I actually think it would be the right thing, given what happened last week and everything. I think it would be the right thing to start him, and I don't think this game for Ireland is going to be won at 9 and 10. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Murray and Sexton roll back the ears,
put in a box kicking masterclass,
bombing masterclass. I don't see it. I don't think they're playing well enough. I would love to see Ireland try and get guys on who aren't there to be the stars of the show, at halfback, but who are just there to facilitate the likes of Ringrose, the likes of Larmour, the likes of Keenan.
Yeah.
And the other question mark is obviously the back three. I think Keith Earls had a disastrous showing, and I'd love to see Larmour come in and take that jersey.
Yeah, form and youth is kind of what you want in your back three players. To be honest, I think the one that I would like to see, which isn't going to happen, is either Casey or Gibson Park getting the 9 jersey, because I think that's the main issue with Ireland, is they don't play with the right tempo to get their game breakers on. I think we did briefly when Gibson Park was on the pitch. We managed to see Jordan Larmour get a few touches, Gary Ringrose get a few touches, get these key James Lowe get on the ball in the white. They just don't see much of the ball when it's not coming out quickly from 9.
Problem with that though is just that, like, at times Murray did get that tempo going, and it's important that he can. And Murray actually has a very good box kick, and I don't think they get through the game in wet weather without a very good box kick. And I just think you could heap pressure on yourself by putting in like a guy who's so green like Casey, or a guy like Gibson Park who really is not a good kicker of football.
He's a passing scrum half, but that's kind of what I want. It's a selfish thing. I just want to see better passing from Ireland.
No, I agree. But I think Murray's playing well enough that I don't think you can justify dropping him with his kicking asset, especially when you're looking at a wet and windy game.
That's probably it's probably true.
No, I would sooner see Murray and Burns, frankly. I don't think Sexton's captain, so if he's fit he plays, and that's just the way it is, but I don't think he played well. He's going to have to play a lot better.
That's true.
For France, it's interesting here. Obviously last week they played stellar, but I mean, when it's against Italy, it's always hard to know, is that their first choice team, or is that just what you were going with on the day.
There's definitely they could change the whole team and still field a great one. There are some questions. The guys like Pinot, who have been there before, had a bad injury that ruled him out of most of last year. Can he force his way back in? Because he'll have to, because there's some great performers in those jerseys that he's eyeing up.
The pack is pretty solid. Like the pack almost picks itself. Cyril by Marchand, Uas, Bernard Leroux and Willemse in a lock have been sensational. Cretin came in and took that jersey. I thought he was excellent. He was really good enforcer role, played nicely with Willemse, took his try well, just looked physical, and another really difficult guy to both tackle and deal with. And obviously Olivon and Aldred,
they're pretty stalwarts. I expect them to play. There is a question: do you throw Wokey in there? Cameron Wokey, big line-out
into
asset.
the 23.
Peter O'Mahony's not available for Ireland. Their line-out has been dodgy in seasons gone by. A guy like Wokey could be seriously, especially if Ireland do go with Kelleher or someone who's a relatively green hooker. There's potential to pressure them with.
I'd love to see them go with Wokey. I think they should. I think the sooner they get him involved, the better. They haven't yet. Jalonche is the guy who they've been putting on the bench, but I would certainly get Wokey involved, if not in the starting team. Probably not in the starting team, but off the bench. I would unleash him. I think he's all kinds of potential, and I think he's all definitely part of the World Cup plan, surely to God. And then obviously they've a rake load of injuries. Oh no, rake load of options in the outside back department. It's all about what they go for.
Well, Dulin played well last week, but Big Boutier has been their asset of choice, and if he's back available, they might chuck him back in. You never know.
Teddy Thomas had a great record against Ireland, great form. He plays. Villiers, did he do enough, or does Pinot
I thought he was very, very good. Was Villiers? He didn't get as much opportunity with ball in hand, but every little bit of scrap that he got, he did a very tidy work with, and he's been brilliant in club rugby for the last 2 seasons. So it's an embarrassment of riches that they're bringing to Dublin to try and test us with. And whichever team they name, I expect a very, very tough test for Ireland.
No question.
And speaking of that test, we will pivot into the game and what both teams are looking to do, and we'll start with the home team, which is our own team, our vested interest, Ireland. And
try not to go too long.
We'll try not to. Well, we'll start the hour-long dissection, post-mortem type thing, pre-mortem. He says no. From Ireland's point of view, it's obviously backs to the wall. We said that at the top of it. They lost their first game. That puts you in a disadvantageous position going forward in the Six Nations.
Yeah, and they're just under pressure. You can sense it. You can sense it in the prickliness of Sexton. You can sense it in the questions they're getting from the media. They're being doubted as a team collectively by media and fans alike. There isn't necessarily consensus on what they should be doing, but there seems to be consensus that what they're doing is wrong. That said, with 14 men, there were some highly impressive performances last week. You look at Tadhg Byrne, you look at Henshaw, had a great game, filling in a flanker at times but carrying really well. Ringrose worked into the distribution game really well.
Keenan as well.
Hugo Keenan, very involved, very busy. Larmour off the bench.
Low, busy. A lot of
Low
carries.
at times, working that boot in was excellent. Bit shaky on defence at times, let's be real, but his kicking game and his carrying awesome.
Tyg Byrne.
Yeah, Tyg Byrne was unbelievably good. A nuisance at breakdown. Josh van der Fleer, excellent in both offense
and then Will
defense.
Connors when he came on to replace a like-for-like replacement in Will Connors as well. A lot of energy, a lot of hustle, a lot of tackles.
CJ Stander likewise, and then obviously Tyg Furlong back and looking as good as ever. There's so much quality in this team that it feels crazy that they could be staring down the barrel of a really tough Six Nations with 2 defeats and games against a class Scotland and England team to come. So that's the shoot of optimism. What we're looking at, like when I was looking at their offense against Wales, it's so crazy how unstructured it is. In terms of just like there's no real shape. There's the odd screen here or there, but sometimes there isn't. And usually outside the 10, who's like in a little boot behind a pot of forwards, it is just 12, 13, 14. And most of the work that gets done happens after players have the ball. I mean, there's no real picking of lines. What there is just passing to one player and then either, like if it's Henshaw or Ringrose, choosing to pass it to the next guy, or okay, I'm going to carry now,
put a bit of
and
footwork.
I'm going to put footwork, I'm going to do whatever. And that was the case for the whole game. There was never much in the way of options, and most of the work in terms of picking a line and working a defence was done by the guy on the ball, and not nearly enough was done by guys off the ball. The tracking runs were all being run to protect the ball. They did a great job of protecting the ball. They do a great job of protecting the ball.
But they don't convert line breaks into tries.
No, and they get 60% possession and score 1 try, and that's a constant now for Ireland. You look at England last year in Twickenham, it's very, very rudimentary. And like France have a similar, especially on multi-phase, they have a similar laissez-faire attitude to shape.
But they do have some shape.
Well, no, what France have that's so different is an instinct for attack. In the sense that they when a guy makes a break and makes a move on his opponent, someone else is picking a tracking line off him. Someone off the ball is picking a line based on the defence to try and bust a hole through it. And when a line break happens, they score because 2 or 3 guys are running on the inside. They're not running to hit a ruck. They're anticipating the break, supporting the guy who breaks the ball, taking passes and finding tries from line breaks. And I look back like the Gary Ringrose break at the very end of the game. As stellar a tackle as it was from Tipperick, and it was exceptional. Gary had no one near him.
Yeah, he was looking for an offload. There was no one there to give it to.
And that's it. Like, this team doesn't anticipate tries from anywhere outside the 22.
No, and then they just pick and jam when they're in there.
And scoring from inside the 22 is getting really difficult against these tough defences. Outside the 22 is where the tries are sometimes. So pick and support runs and just changing that mindset on attack from just protecting the ball at all costs to actually trying to bust open the defence would make a world of difference without even improving the shape at the moment, which is largely non-existent. So like it's very, very, like whether it's off 9 or off 10, it is a carrier with a couple of guys who are going to hit rucks
or latch,
and that's it. And that really, regardless of where they are on the field, that's it. And so it's very, very tough to work space apart from the occasions where they play a bit of heads up rugby and they see that they have, a numbers up situation on the blind side and they can generate a bit of quick ruck ball. And you saw that, because they have such game breaking players. Like Tyg Byrne will see a chance to pick and jam, and he will pick and jam, and then he'll get over, and then all of a sudden it's presented to Murray and he'll use it quickly, and Furlong will bust through, and then it all of a sudden starts to look good without looking in any way sophisticated. And then if you get in a numbers up situation, you can work outside them. Most of the time they get a penalty advantage and they just kick the ball away and it doesn't amount to a try. The try that they did get, most teams wouldn't concede. As well as good a hustle play as it was from Robbie Henshaw, it was kind of crazy the way they just ran a switch line and ran into like 7 or 8 bodies and no one went near him, and Tipperick missed the tackle.
It's true. It's a try you shouldn't really be scoring at the top level, but it's still a try you'll take. At least they did score a try. They're in a better position than England off the back of week 1 for that. But yeah, you alluded to one that is very disappointing, but is a little kind of image of where this team is at, which is when they're under penalty advantage. It's very annoying. Like, it used to be years ago, and I remember Brian O'Driscoll talking about the shift they had. They used to be a team back in like 06, 07 that would get a penalty advantage and then drop in the pocket and kick a drop goal. And then they started realising, it's like, wait a minute, why are we dropping in the pocket and kicking a drop goal? We're already going to take a shot at 3. We don't need to kick a drop goal. We can try for a try. And then they did try for a try. You can try a Hail Mary play of any kind. But in more recent seasons, when they get the penalty advantage, they just kick it away. They don't even try. They have a free play, and
well,
they don't
to be
try
fair,
a lot
just
of
to
the
try
time.
they score against Scotland. Like Sexton
Sometimes
does look at
Crossfield
love
kick.
a
They go for the
Hail
they go
Mary.
for the crossfield kick
Yeah.
or the bomb, but more often than not, what they do is just kick it away and they're content for the penalty. And it's like you're saying, the main difference between these two sides is that instinct for attack and that instinct to go and look for scores. And Ireland, despite they're talking about playing unstructured play or empowering the players to kind of play this heads up rugby is kind of the phrase that's circling from the camp. But what you see with that is that when you're informed guys and your playmakers are the guys not at halfback, and you don't really have distributing force at number 8 either, so it's like it ends up being too much about Sexton and Murray, who aren't playing that well, and not enough about some of the guys who are in better form out wide.
And even when it is about them, it's all about what they're doing as individuals. It's like it's a good carry from Henshaw, followed by a good carry from Tadhg Beirne, followed by Ringrose injecting some tempo with a bit of footwork. But there's nothing coming from the guy outside Ringrose. There's nothing coming from the guy inside Ringrose. There's no blindside wingers working their way in and running tracking lines on the inside.
Yeah.
There's no threat.
Yeah.
And like that's the painful thing for Ireland at the moment, is that it's very, very rudimentary.
Yes.
Now listen, like, we can wax lyrical all day about the potential of Ireland's offence and the difficulties with it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, going into a game against France in wintry conditions,
they're going to
against
kick
Sean
the ball.
Edwards' defence. Yeah, where are they going to look at and see potential weakness, especially
In the
if
sky.
France are bold enough to drop Boutier for Dulin, who is in excellent form, and I'm not suggesting he isn't a brilliant player, but he's vertically challenged and not a man who is designed for the wet, ugly days as much as Boutier might be. And he doesn't have the same weapon that Boutier has with the big boot. Likewise, Villiers, great player, vertically challenged. Likewise, Teddy Thomas, great player, sometimes
not
kind
great
of
in the air.
sometimes kind of suspect in the air.
Yeah.
And like if I'm the Irish coach and I'm realistically assessing a game plan here, I'm thinking Murray and Sexton and pressure and boot, and I'm going to be threatening that back three.
Boot meet ball. Ball boot.
Boot meet ball, ball meet boot. Exactly. I think they're going to kick the ball into the sky and chase and try and disrupt the French back three as best they can and generate red zone attacks from there.
Yes, I'd imagine you're probably right.
Yeah, the only issue, the fear that I have with that game is that it's going to be slow to generate points.
Yeah.
Like I think it could work. I think it could work quite well. And then the question is, like, there's a couple of questions. If Ireland get penalties or get turnover ball and set up attacks deep in the red zone, what does the matchup look like of Ireland in the red zone attacking with Furlongs and Tadhg Beirne and these guys? Like, as we know, it's rudimentary, but it is physical at the best of times. And
knowing what's coming doesn't mean you're going to stop it.
Certainly
If France
Tadhg
aren't
Furlong
quite
there.
up to it, then suddenly they will get run over if they're not at the pitch. But they haven't looked not up to the pitch on defence ever since Sean Edwards come in. And Sean Edwards' defences have a good record of stopping a rudimentary Irish offence. They can be very robust. And
I do think back to the Cian Healy try that he got in Paris at the start of the game last year, and I think maybe there's scope for that. However, against England and against Italy last week, just their defence in the red zone is so stellar. Like, Ireland would probably be wise to take 3 pointers.
Oh, I'd say there will be
rather
3
than
pointers
settle
plenty,
down for intense, 10-minute periods of attack that don't culminate in anything.
Yeah.
And then the question is 3-6-9 going to be enough against a team who can score 14 points in 2 minutes?
Yeah.
And
that's one question is, are they going to keep France from scoring for the entire game? This is a big question as well.
And that's where you look at the defence.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the hidden problem with Ireland at the moment.
Yeah.
Is just how bad their record is on defence in terms of tries conceded to minutes opposition have the ball in their half.
Because they tend to have dominant possession stats and yet concede lots of points and don't score a lot of points.
It was the same last week. Wales had pretty much 2 visits to the 22, both of which ended up being tries, and quick tries at that. Like pretty quick. Like, it's a curiosity, and as tough and physical as Ireland can be, and as lethal as Tadhg Beirne can be at the breakdown, like, there definitely is a weakness there, just in terms of their wide defence, that France will be definitely looking to exploit,
and did do very recently in that game in Paris last autumn. They killed Ireland punished them for loose kicks, which could yet be a thing that happens as well. You can't kick too loosely to them because their unstructured defence and their transitional defence is pretty slow, and France's instincts are pretty
one
quick.
of the things that Ireland have been caught in, you saw it against Wales, and you've seen it against France as well, is just like off a line out or off a scrum on one side of the field. if you go from that side of the field to the right hand side of the field in a couple of phases and then flash it left, like
there's
a
space.
freakish amount of time Andrew Porter is in the 13 channel and his nearest man on his inside is Cian Healy. And like a freakish amount of time they have the two props together in that scenario. And that's what happened when Johnny May broke away. That's what happened at the start of the game. It's
when Ficou scored his try in France as well, same thing.
Exactly right. And Ireland have this like robust and physical defence that looks very, very difficult to deal with in and around the ruck, and really inside the 12 channel. They come up at a ferocious pace. They hit hard. They are intense at the breakdown.
Attack the ball.
They attack the ball. They look very, very difficult. And then all of a sudden, if you stand deep, as France did the last time, I thought Ntamak played so well that day.
He did.
It was his best game in the French shirt. They sat deep. They moved the ball. They got outside that initial blitz. And as soon as they got there, like all of a sudden they were forwards. All of a sudden the speed of the line speed broke down, and then it was just sluggish. It was just pace versus not pace, and teams got around them. And you've seen that picture a few times. You even saw it there last week against Wales. Like James Lowe cutting in off his wing instead of holding his width. Like those little things could be absolutely killer against France. And if France can get to their outside, they're going to score tries. And from Ireland's defensive point of view, it's about not making that happen. And I think it involves...
Big job for the centres.
I think it involves holding your width a little more, and maybe that comes at the expense of just the aggressive inside line speed, but moving Henshaw and Ringrose a little wider and forcing France to sort of operate in narrower channels might make a bit more sense as far as containing them, because at least then you get your playmakers in at the ruck and it makes it slow, it makes it difficult.
And they do have, in terms of their defence, they do have a useful asset in Josh van der Fleer and then Will Connors off the bench, tackling machines and line speed setters. They actually do create that blitz. They pressure the 10 straight away, which kind of means there's scope to move those centres a little wider if you're trusting him to set that line, and then you have CJ or someone else inside that's pretty rock solid around the ruck. You can afford to be a little bit, just cover the wider space. Big job for Ringrose, who has a history of making good reads with a little bit of soft tackle issue. Sometimes he makes a perfect read and bounces off the tackle, which is something that France will duly punish should that happen again.
Yeah, of course. And listen, France like to play at a frenetic tempo, and that's one thing that Ireland don't like, is when the pace gets too quick for them. So making it slow and scrappy at the breakdown and matching whatever energy France are bringing your own energy, is definitely going to be brutal. It's definitely going to be huge. I mean, you're thinking big tackles, big dominant tackles, slow tackles that are huge. You know, where you grab a guy, stop him, and then all of a sudden shunt him backwards, and 4 or 5 seconds are eaten up in the tackle. It allows the defensive line to get set. It pushes the attacking team back, and very often it kills an attack. Those kind of dominant tackles from the likes of CJ Stander, that's going to be a big factor. If Ireland can get those going, they might shut the French down.
Well, if it's to be a little slippy out there, a little cold, like there's potential for it. We've seen Toulouse, even with the great Dupont, we've seen them be a little bit arrhythmical, a little less sharp, and then if you can impose yourself physical hits, you can upset them. That's definitely part of the recipe to success.
The other thing that I've noted with this French team, and this isn't necessarily an Ireland specific point, but it's a point for teams who are playing against France, because France at the moment are the most clinical team I've seen at turning line breaks into tries, because their support play is outstanding. And I'm just reminded of a particular game which took place in similar circumstances, which was the Super Rugby semi-final. You'll know this well.
I know it.
We may have covered it at the time. I'm sure we did.
2017
Super Rugby semi-final between Dave Rennie's Chiefs team and Scott Robertson's up-and-coming Crusaders team. It was their first win. But the Crusaders played this Chiefs team who were just tearing teams apart all season long, and they just were playing with this verve and this offensive rhythm that looked impossible to stop. It had a young Damien McKenzie playing. I don't think he's ever quite reached the form he had since, as brilliant as he is. It had Aaron Cruden at 10. It had James Lowe, Tim Nanai Williams, Charlie Nyatai, Anton Linnert-Brown.
Brilliant team.
Just incredible team. And they were very, very similar. Kerballo at scrum half as well was running those Dupont-esque lines. They were very, very similar in that they were explosive. They picked lines off one another, and whenever they broke the line, everyone was dialed in. They were dialed into attack, and they found tries. And the way that the Crusaders in that semi-final put on a defensive masterclass and shut them down. But the curious way that they did it was so interesting, because you so rarely see it in rugby, there was like a man marking, almost like a football game. Once they broke the line, the guys who were picking the support lines were being man marked by the Crusaders.
Getting in the passing lane.
They generated line breaks, but very often it was Mackenzie or it was Nyata, and he was looking for players, and the players were picking the runs, but there was a Crusader marking him.
Yeah.
I think that the way to solve this DuPont riddle to some extent, the way to solve this 9 tracking run, is to mark him, is to have somebody, ideally the opposite scrum half, who's obviously guarding that backfield anyway.
Yeah.
But just if they're looking to probe and threaten the line on the outside, somebody needs to have an eye on DuPont, and when they break the line, it's the fullback's responsibility to go to the ball carrier. It's your responsibility, maybe as the 9, to go on DuPont and to make sure that pass doesn't get made because you're there in the lane. And I just think that defensive strategy that worked so well, teams don't deploy it nearly often enough.
Yeah, I'd agree, especially with aggressive attacking teams like France. It's a really good way of shutting the door on them because it's a confusing
mark the
picture.
tracking runners. Yeah, it's so unusual to see it in rugby, and yet it seems so obvious.
Yeah,
you see it in other sports, like if Jamie Vardy is making a run through in a football match for Leicester, mark him. Somebody go. You have to run with him. You can't let him go.
Yeah, indeed.
And Dupont's doing the same thing. Like, he's running in behind the defence, ready to receive a pass. Somebody has to go with him. I definitely think that's something that Ireland should be looking at this week, to just not allow line breaks to become tries as they do so readily for France.
Yeah, and then from their own point of view, try and turn their own line breaks into tries would be nice as well. But maybe I'm being selfish, I'm being greedy. But
Ireland need to win this game 9-0.
I wouldn't mind
defensive masterclass.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I'd take it because
Yeah.
I'm fearful of this France team and the threat that they pose. And we will look at the game from a French point of view now as well, because from an offensive point of view, as we alluded to, the main thing for them is tempo. Who sets the tempo in this game is going to be key. If it's a slow kind of kicking affair, I probably do expect Ireland to edge it, unless they get sloppy and France do execute in one moment to take the try. That could happen in that. But if, by contrast, France are the ones setting the tempo, then France win this game.
France hate instinctually the speed at which Ireland play rugby, and this Ireland team hates the speed that France play rugby. And so absolutely the tempo is vital, and we know Dupont sets that tempo as well. From an offensive point of view, I just think when Ireland are at their absolute best, they are a nightmare to deal with at the breakdown. And while they don't have Peter O'Mahony, they have a more than able substitute in Ty Byrne in terms of that leading that breakdown disruption.
And even the likes of Porter in the tight
Porter,
is very good.
CJ Stander comes up with some big steals very, very often. They are disruptive and they pick their moments, and they're very, very difficult to get out of the way. So I think they are going to have to focus on ball protection as well, and being a little more patient on offense and identifying when they need to be there. And I think the task of that back row from an offensive breakdown point of view is going to be absolutely massive.
Get clean ball, get quick rucks and clean ball for Dupont, which is your key man.
Think of the guys.
It's a big job for Aldrit and for Olivon to try and present
Olivon in
this.
particular, and these guys who aren't ball carriers necessarily. Mohamed Ouas is another you'd look to as like guy. They have to be excellent on the latch and excellent at just not allowing an Irishman in there. Like, quick ruck ball is at an absolute premium, and Ireland and Ireland are going to be doing absolutely everything that they can do to prevent them from getting that.
Yes, I would imagine so. So that's going to be a key focus for them. It starts with the carry as well, like obviously targeting soft shoulders. When you get a dominant collision, it's much easier to get quick ball. If you're driven back, it's much tougher as well. So it starts with the technical carry, obviously, things like running onto the ball, which you will be forced to do anyway, which is one of the great things about the way Dupont plays the game, is that he just invites runners onto every pass rather than kind of checking their run with it. It's the opposite. He forces you forward. So that's going to be a key for them, is try and get those key ball runners over the advantage line, occupy the likes of Josh van der Fleer, because van der Fleer is going to shoot out and pressure your 10. If you can force him to make a tackle and then go on the next phase, he's not there doing that because he's on the bottom of a ruck. That's like a super simple thing that you can target to try and to kind of manipulate the Irish defensive line and then get to the extremities. They should be trusting their passing game, even in the wind and the wet, to try and move the Irish about, because the Irish don't like moving about, and they don't like teams that attack them with the full width of the pitch and at tempo. So you should try and force them to do so. Try and force them to defend,
especially if Ireland are being super aggressive in the narrow channels.
But
what I will say is, no matter how aggressive Ireland are, they do have a big pack. They do not have an unbreakable pack.
No.
And I think it would be an absolute statement if France, with the likes of our big man Willemse here, he's become such a key enforcer in that second row, and Dylan Curtin, who's come into that team,
as well,
and Bernard Leroux. Like, if they can get on top of the contacts, if they can impose themselves physically, because they're big guys, they have a big pack. I guarantee, player for player, they're heavier than Ireland. If they can use that weight and get on top of the Irish counterparts, especially without the likes of James Ryan, like, as good as Tadhg Beirne is, like, he's a flanker playing lock in a lot of ways. Like, if Willemse can run at him, force him to make the tackles instead of getting the jackals in, like, there's very real scope for them to get on top of Ireland physically, which is a picture that Ireland just can't tolerate.
And if they couple that with a few scores of a lead, like, Ireland are a pretty good front-running team and a terrible chasing team.
Ireland can't chase games. That's how France got them last time, early scores. Another area that they did so well last time with Ntamack was just checking the Irish aggression on defence with clever little kicks in behind. Murray doesn't.
It's often there against Ireland.
Murray doesn't cover that space. Murray's in the line a lot of the time, so they don't have a 9 covering that space. Hugo Keenan has plugged a lot of the holes that were there when the likes of Stockdale were filling in at fullback. Like, it was a mess with Stockdale, let's be real. But he's still a young man. He still makes mistakes from the odd time. He still can't cover the whole field. And little kicks into where the space is, forcing Ireland to be under pressure and just checking that line speed.
It's a big job for Jalibert, to be honest.
It is. Ntamack did it so well the last time.
He showed the exact blueprint of how to do it. It's a different man in that jersey, but a similar role that needs to be performed by him. Like, obviously it's Petit General for France. It's going to be Dupont mainly, but Jalibert has his role to play, and those little probing kicks in behind, when you see the defence coming up that quickly, it's very off and on, and it's a tough one to execute, but it needs to be gone to and executed well. Then the other thing as well is just if Ireland are proving successful with some of their defensive things, like if they're actually stalled, if momentum's kind of disrupted and things aren't going, it is ultimately on Dupont to kind of mix that up. You'll want to see him kind of taking it off the ruck and probing around those fringes before inviting those runners on. What you don't want to see is it getting a little lateral and a little slow. Because if they're not setting the tempo and they're sort of forcing the issue in the wet and the wind,
they'll kick the box kicks, especially if it's a wet day, but they'll kick the box kicks if that's what's on. Like, if they're stopped, like, let's be real, like, we can romanticize all we want, that's what teams are going to do, is just limit the potential errors and put the pressure on the opposition, especially when you're looking at a side as limited as Ireland on the ball. Like, they're not going to fear Ireland having the ball. So if they're in there,
they're showing good capacity to kick it away. Sure, they did it to England as well. There's no fear.
Exactly. If they're in their own half, I think most of the time they're going to be box kicking anyway. And if they're in the opposition half and it's stalling, they'll look to probe the corners, they'll look to test the Irish pendulum and just put them under pressure, because they're not really fearing anything the other way.
No, they're the more dangerous team with ball in hand, and they with their defence being as good as it has been over the last few seasons, they should have confidence in it, and they'll be comfortable enough playing without the ball for a time, especially against an Ireland team that aren't that clinical. So then defensively from that point of view, France are, as we said, very much improved. One of the most improved teams in international rugby as far as the seismic shift in their defensive strategy and just energy in general. Like, the way they're
adding layers to it as well. It's still not as good as the Welsh defence that Sean Edwards took to the World Cup.
No,
that was polished over 10
early
years.
days.
But it's very impressive. It's robust in the red zone. They starting in the last few games to work in jackals, which weren't there before. You're seeing Aldred come in with some big time
targeting
steals.
The balls. It needs to be well timed, because you don't need to go in all the time, but when you see it's there, go for it. Poach the ball.
They're adding layers to it, but at the moment it's just it's line speed and quality of tackling, and they just have raw talent when it comes to physicality and when it comes to just athletic attributes.
Yes, they have a lot of good assets to pick from.
They've married that with discipline
and a work ethic. It's great. Like, he's managed to extinct one of the seismic changes Edwards has made is he's removed the try that was there for many teams over many years with this France team that was just on the second or third phase post set piece, targeting the inside because the forwards weren't folding working the short side because they weren't folding around the corner. And now they are putting the work in. They are running on when they're off the ball. They're
plugging the space around the rucks and forcing teams to go wide. And Italy did get some purchase out wide against them. It wasn't perfect, but once it got into the red zone, it did tighten up.
And the same strategy should be true for Ireland. Like, you should be daring Ireland to go wide. Realistically, looking at what Ireland do with the ball, just like plug everything narrow.
Yeah.
If Stander's going to run tight, meet him with 2 forwards.
Yeah.
Because you're going to try and repel him, because Ireland are going to wait for a bit of go forward before they try to do anything.
Yeah.
And you should be daring them to make, there's space, there's a whole acre of space out here in the 15-metre channel, but it'll take you 4 passes to get there.
Yeah, well, indeed.
It's just not going to happen.
Ireland have shown a little better capacity to do that. There was one sequence where it was like nice towards the end of the game where it was nice Gibson Park pass, nice Burns pass, nice Ringrose pass, winger.
Yeah,
and
love to see it.
Yeah, but that is the exception, not the rule when it comes to Ireland, and certainly making them make those decisions feels like a very useful play.
No, I think it'll be their strategy.
Yeah, just nothing stupid, nothing soft and nothing stupid.
Yeah,
I mean, if I was to write 2 things on a chalkboard for the French team, that's what I'd say. Nothing soft, nothing stupid.
Yeah.
Make Ireland make difficult plays in attack. They're not very comfortable moving the ball at the moment.
Yeah.
They are quite rudimentary. They try and wear teams down and protect the ball. So be patient.
Yeah.
Don't give them anything easy. And eventually,
hit them hard.
Hit them hard on the inside, and don't give them anything easy, and do not give away penalties. Don't stray offside.
Yeah.
Don't hit high tackles. Don't go into
flop into rucks.
Yeah, don't go into rucks you don't belong. Make Ireland make the play.
Yeah.
Make Ireland get up the pitch. And listen, if you repel them 2 or 3 phases, 9 times out of 10 they're going to send a bomb up, and then it's on the back 3 to deal with that.
Yes, which is a key part of their defence thing. They need to field those.
Yeah.
They need to expect to be fielding a lot of kicks.
And as they did with England as well, just launch it back. I mean, I would be shocked. I think Boutier is a key part of what they're doing, especially just the way the game is at the moment. I think the value of the deep kick is going to could well end up being the narrative of the Six Nations. It was certainly the narrative of round 1, and I think like Boutier is such a massive weapon in there. I'd be shocked if he didn't come in and play. But even if it's Brice Doolan, like just launching the balls deep,
same equation
punishing
equation as the English team, because like as poor as Ireland's offence can sometimes look, when they strike off line out for the first couple of phases, as we highlighted, and think they can sit you down and create space, and maybe one of these days accidentally they'll score a try. But they do look dangerous off set piece. What they do not look dangerous off, much to my chagrin, I've been praying for so long, praying to the gods of counter-attacking rugby for Ireland to score a kick return try. Hasn't happened yet. Happened in years.
Last time out against Wales, they were green shoots of
kick
return. Gary Ringrose found himself in the back line a couple of times. It was him and Keenan, and there was a decent telepathy there.
There was potential for it, but it still hasn't happened yet. And if I'm hedging my bets as far as like, I'm going to clear this ball now for exit. Are Ireland more dangerous if I give them a line out in the 10-metre line, or if I just pump it deep to their fullback?
They'll
pump it deep.
Pump it deep, and that's absolutely the key. Punish them for kicking the ball into the air. If Ireland kick the ball into the air in the French half, they need to field that ball and launch it back to the Irish 22, and then say like,
I dare you.
Now you're there.
Come on.
Now you're there. Try it again. And that's the key. Like if you limit your mistakes against this Irish offense, that
you'll discourage them.
Is a pressure offense. Yeah, they'll end up like Sexton will end up losing the head if it doesn't work for them, and they'll end up winning the game. I think.
Yes.
If they just limit their mistakes and play with a composure and physicality to match Ireland, they're I think a better quality team in a much better place, and certainly a better coached team at the moment.
If they do that from minute 1, if they come at it with that approach, I think they're very likely to win the game. I think they're probably favourites to win the game. If they start sloppily and give a few easy entrances, and suddenly Ireland do go 3-0 or 6-0 up, the task becomes much more difficult, because as Irish fans, like it's annoying to watch them, but when they have a little bit of a lead and a little bit of a foothold in the game, they can be annoying to play against the whole time.
Like this is the thing, like when with all of our dismay at times at Ireland, like they have some bloody brilliant players and they can look excellent sometimes. They're not like a hopeless entity, and that's almost what makes it more frustrating. But the quality of some of these guys that they have in their team coming through, like I think Hugo Keenan is an exceptional talent at fullback. I think Gary Ringrose has the potential to be an all-round world-class 13. Ty Byrne looks exceptional. Ty Furlong we know is exceptional. There's quality all over the pitch for Ireland. It's not quite there at halfback at the moment, which is where we're used to seeing it. But there is quality all over the pitch and very, very exciting talent. And when they play well, they can be absolutely excellent.
Especially if you give them a lead in the first quarter. Don't invite them in if you're France, you know.
Yeah, player for player, you'd be inclined to say France have the better team, but it's not necessarily true. I think, Aldridge's a fine player, but CJ Stander has it in him to outplay him. Likewise, Willems is a fine player, but Ian Henderson or James Ryan have the capacity to outplay him, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tyke Byrne in the back row has the capacity to outplay Olivon.
Mohamed the Huas house.
Yeah, Mohamed the Huas is no Tyke Furlong. And obviously DuPont is better than his corresponding player. It doesn't work
I'll give them DuPont.
Yeah, it doesn't work in every position, even though it works in most. But my point is that things are never as different as they appear.
Yeah.
But the key for me is that I just think France are really well coached at the moment, and I think Ireland are getting little to no help from their coach. The good plays are coming out of nowhere. They're coming from hustling plays from individuals, and there doesn't seem to be much coaching going on at all in Ireland. And so that's where I think the difference is. And
it's an unusual thing to say. Normally it would be the reverse
in
terms of previewing an Ireland-France game.
Absolutely, but I just don't really see where the coaching is at the moment in terms of what Ireland are doing on either side of the ball.
Yeah. So with all that said then, what do you think's going to happen? It's always tough to predict these Ireland games because the green lenses definitely tint things.
And it can tint it one way or another. Sometimes it can tint it negatively because you can just be in this negative mindset with your team where, remember when we were the best team in the world in 2018 and everyone thought we were going to win the World Cup, and now we're just
not everyone.
Yeah. But didn't they? Didn't they?
Oh, I certainly did. I predicted we'd win the last 3 World Cups because that's my patriotic prerogative.
Yeah.
But as such, I'm going to predict we win this game. And sure, why not? Bonus point. No.
And how does it happen?
No, I think it happens. Well, if Ireland are to win the game, it happens by them taking a reasonably early lead and managing to control those early exchanges, frustrate France, and then prey on mistakes, own the territory.
I think they have to bring a lot of energy on defence.
Oh, I do. I think that's the other thing. It involves them hitting the ground running in a reaction from last week's disappointment.
It's so long since they played a match with I know it feels cliche to talk about passion and intensity. It's almost like roll your eyes.
Yeah.
But that's it's been a vacuum, this team.
Well, yeah. Well, certainly under Schmidt there was definitely a kind of a very process-driven kind of numbness to the way they approached the game. But sometimes they
look
did.
Look at the game against New Zealand back in 2018.
Yeah.
That's the height of heights under Schmidt.
Yeah.
But if you look at the hustle, like Devon Toner and Ryan combining and driving Retallick back, and obviously the crowd brings that energy as well. But when the team are just bringing that unreal energy and just living or dying with every play and slapping each other on the back and just looking charged, I think they need that kind of performance. And if they bring that kind of performance, they can win the game.
Yeah.
But if you ask me what I think, what do I say when I don't know, is the better team wins. The better team is France, I think, comfortably right now. I think they're a much better team. And I just think that this is an appropriate notch to knock off for them right now, in the sense that
they're building.
They didn't win away in Scotland last year. They should have. They're now away in Dublin, a place where they haven't won in a long time. It's going to be tough. It's going to be against a physical team, but they have a much better attack. Can they shut them down and frustrate them and then find the 1 or 2 scores necessary to win ugly but efficiently? I think they can. And I think, if I was to score it, I'd say still a 1-score game, but just by enough, maybe 17-11 or something like that. Just enough. Enough to win the game. And I think that's my call.
Okay, I'm going to say an 18-16 win to Ireland. Hurrah!
Hey, it could happen.
I'm dreaming. I could say 50-0 as well.
One win against France, you'd have been right, the last 4 times.
France get COVID 28-0.
That's
I don't like it at all.
Don't be saying things like that. No. We have to touch wood now.
Yes, we do. Yeah, and hopefully not to that. What I will say is that it's a great game. It always is a great game. It's one of my favourite games in the Six Nations, just because it looks different each time. There's always a different picture to Ireland France. It always paints a funny old one, and whenever the teams win, they tend to deserve it. It's currently France. They won last time in Paris, and they rightly deserved it. And hopefully back in Dublin now we can do them a bit bit of pain and get ourselves back in the championship. That's what I'm hoping for.
Let's see. Listen, that puts to bed the Six Nations, and
yes.
Boy oh boy, we did go on, and we do go on talking about that. But it's an awesome, mouth-watering prospect. Week 2, Week 1 set it up so well. But we are going to move on. We are going to look at just some other matters international rugby. We have the Rugby Europe Championship 2020, I might say, finished up at the weekend. There was a couple of games, one called off game, but the main headline is that Georgia secured the Grand Slam with a 16-7 win over Russia. An ugly win for the Georgians.
They wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, I think there was shoots of concern from Georgia from this one. Like, they had this irritating situation where a number of their key players weren't able to play. And they had this very old team that they fielded. I mean, it's for me, they're crying out for an injection of youth, and that's
certainly an injection of pace in
but
the back
an injection
line,
of youth, even a prop forward. Like Russia's try came from taking a scrum on Georgia's 5-metre line, winning a penalty and taking a scrum, and that's just not something that happened 2-3 years ago. And it's because the props that they're picking are now in like their mid-30s. Like, they need to get these under 20 teams who are still dominating the scrums on the ball.
Those young scrummagers in there
into the team, I should say. And they look a very old team. They look a very tired team. Lobson Dads' try was good, but outside of that, they very struggled to create. And while they did dominate the territory battle, as they often do, it was 0-0 at half time. Their backline, full of old men, didn't function at all. Kamaladze was still in there doing nothing good. And lots of drop goals, lots of poor play, and a very, very ugly game. And you could actually see it at full time. I've never seen a group of players look so grumpy to win a Grand Slam. Like, I think they know as well as anybody after that Autumn Nations Cup that they need to be building to a better degree than what they are, and I think they're frustrated with where they're at right now in a lot of ways. And there's the potential for them to stall, and that
would be unfortunate, because they are one of the great teams in rugby. We are big fans of them.
Big admirers. I love just how passionate they are about the game out there.
Well, it's
a small country, about 3 million people, and they live and breathe the game.
It's their national sport, which is not true of many teams that play the game to a high standard. It's great. They're a great value.
They bring a lovely passion. They bring such positive energy as a fan community.
Yes, that's right.
They're also a colourful picture at the best of times. Conor O'Shea was throwing shade at them in response to people calling for Italy to leave the championship, or for there to be a pathway to promotion relegation, which of course there should be, but won't be for financial interests.
Yes.
But like the idea that Italy are necessarily a better team than, or a better product than Georgia, because a trip to Rome is nice, and they ship lovely tries and try and score lovely tries, as opposed to Georgia, who try and drag the game down. I like a bit of versatility. I like a team that has a different national identity and a different approach to the game.
I certainly admire a team that make it difficult to play against them,
and that's what Georgia
try to do that to more.
Sometimes they don't, but like at the very best, they can frustrate the hell out of teams. They can just be like, and I do like that a bit more than Italy, who just sort of let teams have their way with them.
Roll over and get their tummy tickled.
But yes, the other game that took place was Spain against Portugal, which we had billed as a great game.
Great game,
in the context of World Cup qualification as well. Two teams very much breathing down each other's neck. And Spain ran out the winners. They kicked on in the third quarter and took the game away from Portugal. It was a 6-5 lead they had at half time. The Portuguese copped a yellow card, and in that period Spain scored 2 tries, including just a lovely score with like a rakeload of offloads.
Love it.
They bring out the occasional worldy of a score.
They both both those teams do try and move the ball, which is nice. They have a lovely kind of style to them, both of them. And that was seemingly the game breaking moment, because Portugal didn't have enough to respond.
And they actually capped it off with a nice maul try with a few minutes from time as well, just to cement the win and make it clear that they are the big dogs at the moment on the Iberian Peninsula in a rugby contest.
And in front runners to try and go to that French World Cup that both of them will definitely be eyeballing and having machinations to try and be at.
There are, though, as always with this competition, as much as I'm determined to sell it from a rugby point of view, As always, it drags itself down into the mud and becomes a mess.
Some of this chat is ridiculous.
So usually when we talk about this, we spend half the time talking about rugby and half the time talking about a load of bureaucratic nonsense.
Yes.
And that's what it is again, because the other game didn't take place. The Belgian government didn't allow Belgium to travel to Romania for COVID reasons.
Right.
And so Rugby Europe declared it a
28-0, as is the Fiji precedent.
It's a terrible Fiji precedent. Which has airlifted Romania from bottom of the table to third.
Woohoo.
And consequently leaves Belgium in bottom position, and now Belgium have to play a playoff game for their lives.
It's no good.
Which is curious, because the stipulations given to them were arrange the game and have it played before June 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's a promotion relegation playoff for the 2021 competition, which starts in March.
How does that work?
I don't know.
Are Belgium, if the government didn't let them play that game, how are they going to play this game?
I don't know. I think it was something to do with the travel to Romania at the time anyway.
Right.
I don't know the specifics of it, except to say that the game didn't happen and Belgium are punished for it.
Yes.
The latest drama that's come out today is that Spain might yet again have fielded ineligible players, as they did, that cost them the World Cup.
Cost them their World Cup place. How can they still be fielding ineligible players? I don't get it.
Yeah, I know.
What is
I
this?
don't know why they're fielding ineligible players or how that's coming about, except to say that that's the charge again, and a points deduction for it could parachute them from second to bottom and put them in the playoff jeopardy.
Having just won a lovely game against Portugal. Which
would parachute Romania from bottom of the table going into the final weekend all the way to second.
Yeah. Woohoo, Romania, second best
team. It's funny how these things always work out for Romania, but it's just funny. It's like
nuts, really.
always this competition manages to just dump on its own credibility.
Yes, a little
despite
bit.
Despite the teams trying their best to play some good footy, and that's the shame of it.
Yeah, and just to give a rundown then of how the final placement finished, Georgia finished atop with 23, Spain currently on 14, but remains to be seen whether they remain there. Romania now on 10.
5 real points and 5 fake ones.
Yes, Portugal on 9, Russia also on 9, but behind on points difference, and then Belgium on the bottom with 7 currently, depending on punitive measures for ineligible players.
Well, no, Belgium I don't think have an ineligible player situation.
No, I mean Spain could bring them back down, and you never know. But that is currently how it is, and Georgia are definitely champions, as they pretty much always are.
That's the one thing that remains steadfast. Although I tell you, Spain could shock them. I feel like
if Georgia don't improve,
I feel like
Spain
there
are
might be
improving.
a shock coming the way Georgia are playing, but like they still
it hasn't happened yet. They seem to have way too much physicality for that competition.
Yeah, they need coaching help, and they need an injection of youth if they are going to stay on top, because Spain are coming for us.
Yes,
that much is true. Listen, we're just going to wrap up domestic rugby. We have taken a look now at Test rugby, and there isn't much going on in the domestic game right now, but there's a couple of games in the Pro 14 this weekend. The Dragons are going to take on Edinburgh, Glasgow are going to face Benetton, a couple of rescheduled games. What's interesting there is that female referee Holly Davidson is set to take charge of the Glasgow Benetton game.
That's the Scottish ref, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
she's
great.
Really good. Yeah.
And like Joy Neville has been this glass ceiling breaker, and like frankly, I don't quite rate her as much as I rate Holly Davidson from the games I've seen her, the women's games I've seen her ref.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see this, and I definitely think, expanding the breaking that glass ceiling has been very important, and it's great to see women refs doing well for no other reason than the standard of refereeing in the Pro 14 has been so poor.
The standard of refereeing in the game right now is so poor. If
just,
anyone, I'd let a small child ref it if he could ref it well.
Regardless of that, I just think expanding the pool of talent from which you're picking makes all the sense in the world. 100%. And I actually think she's quite a good ref, so I really hope it goes well for her, and I hope to see her rising through the ranks quickly enough so that soon enough she can be taking some big games and maybe reffing Six Nations games, who knows.
Hopefully so.
That's great news.
Yeah. And then in Top Couture's land, we had a few games. There was a full round of action that took place last weekend, despite the Six Nations going on. We had La Rochelle falling to Racing. It was away in Racing, but it was a tight game, and it narrows things up at the top. 7 points separate a top 4 of Toulouse, La Rochelle, Racing and Clermont. What a pretty top 4 that is.
I tell you,
it was only a few years ago that we were bemoaning the fact that the Top Coutures get all the best players in the world, only to beat lumps out of them and for them to play out 9-6 draws. But
they're starting to figure things out.
Oh,
and I'm not yet sure if that's a good thing.
Well,
but they are starting to figure things out over in France on a macro level. I mean, it's great for the French national side, and I don't begrudge them 1 ounce. But the top couture is starting to look great, and it's starting to be churning up all of the top talent, and sooner or later it's going to be. It's starting to look like they're moving to an inevitable situation where they have all the elite players and teams in Europe.
Yeah.
It's going to be tougher and tougher for teams like Leinster to compete by the looks of it. But those 4 teams are playing awesome rugby, and it's vindication for people who like to see running rugby that those teams are atop the table of such a good league as well, and that the power games of Toulon of yesteryear have been,
and even Montpellier and stuff
fallen away.
The likes of them, and then similar narratives over in the Premiership. Although Bristol did lose at home to Sale in a tight game, and again it
defensive masterclass from the South African Sharks against Pat Lamb's running rugby. Addendum that Ranradra had a COVID contact and wasn't able to play.
That always changes Bristol for the worse, as it would any team. It does so for Fiji too. But Bristol are still sitting just atop the Premiership with 30 points. Exeter now in second with 28. They just won a tight game away in Newcastle. That was 15-9, a very, very tight one, but a good win to get. Sale are now in third as well with 27. And there's a bit of a gap to fourth where Quins now sit. They won away in the Rec, 28-15, a very impressive win for Quins at the weekend. And then meanwhile, Marcus Smith looking great. Actually, London Irish are up in playoff contention as well. A decent start to the season. They're around 20 points. You have to go to the bottom of the table to see where the fortunes are worse. And Gloucester, my God, Gloucester. We mentioned them last week. They lost again this week. That was away to London Irish. They're in real trouble. They're in jeopardy because they look rubbish, and they've lost Cipriani.
I would
hate
to see Gloucester
go
down. I must say, I've always liked them as a club. I just don't like seeing this of them in any way. I love Kingsholm. I love their approach to the game, and it's just sad to see them impotent at the moment. And I didn't think when they got rid of Ackerman that was actually wise. I didn't blame Ackerman for their sort of frustrating shortcomings. I thought he was a good coach, and I feel vindicated in that sense. But
it's kind of hollow because you have the likes of Ollie still director of rugby. I'm not sure. He might. I think he is. Yeah. It's not going well. Is right. So trouble is definitely there for Gloucester. They'll need to turn that around. But the Premiership rolls on, and it's still a very good product. A lot of good games being played in that.
Elsewhere, Super Rugby AU set to kick off next week, with Super Rugby Aotearoa kicking off the week after. As we have a gap week next week for the Six Nations, it's going to be a week off. I think we're going to dig into both competitions and take a little preview of each in next week's show. It's just a handy thing to do in the gap week. Yeah,
we'll definitely go into them in detail. We'll probably have to put them on the back burner then when the Six Nations resumes, as is the thing. But we will make mention of them because it is good to see those two domestic competitions going up again, and then the prospect of a postseason.
Tell you what, the television rights for Super Rugby Aotearoa are not bought by anybody right now over here, that is. So I hope somebody picks that up. I would hate to be
deprived of it.
It's tough as well, when the game's kicking off at 6 a.m. on a weekday, you can't
record
live stream it, you can't and it's going to be tough.
Can I record the live stream?
No, it's going to be tough to watch these games back. I know. You get these terrible highlight reels that don't tell you anything, and it would be an absolute shame if we didn't get to watch the Kiwi rugby over here, because it's one of the great club competitions in the world. It was the best club competition last year. It was just sensational to watch.
It was brilliant.
So I'd love to I'd love it if somebody over here could get the rights to it. And,
or just stick it on Facebook.
Stick it on Facebook. That's the future, I tells you.
Alright, with that we will move on to our final segment, which is the rugby news of the week, as is our traditional way of wrapping up the show. We had good news with regard to the women's game, and the Women's Six Nations got approved for a new format. It's going to take place in a 3-week window from the 3rd to the 25th of April, and it's going to be a similar format to the Autumn Nations Cup, whereby there are kind of 2 pools of 3 teams competing to rank first, second and third, and then each team will play the 2 games, one home and away, to decide their pool ranking. So
so you play 2 games, and then you play a finals weekend with first playing first, second playing second, third playing third, and decide it that way. It's a COVID workaround. It's not as good as the other form. Like the women's teams,
no, it's not ideal.
The women's teams need games, but most of these teams are amateur.
I know.
And, it's impossible to get travel and everything going.
No, they seem just happy to have some plan in place to play some rugby.
I tell you what I do like, and what I think should be permanent, is moving it away from the actual Six Nations.
Yeah,
like it's been this tradition for so long to play the under-20s and the women's and the men's on the same weekend, and I don't think it does them any favours.
No,
because it buries them.
Yeah,
it just buries them. And sometimes you can do these double headers with the England game, but like they're just never going to be a story when the men's game is on, and whether that's right or wrong, that's just the way it is. I would love to see them branch it out and play it a little later, play it in June, early June. The seasons are just finishing. If you're only competing with a top couture's final, all of a sudden England France looks like the game to watch this weekend. Yeah. So absolutely. I think I like this window for them, and I think they should strongly consider permanently moving the Women's Six Nations to a different window.
I would agree, and it's exactly that reason. It does end up buried, and it's for a shame. Like the women's game is great, and you want to support it, but the fact is, like, the Six Nations is so stratospherically huge for all of these unions involved in it, and for all the news relating to it, that it's like you are doing them no favours to play. I don't mind the under-20s. I think is fine. You can do that. Yeah, that's fine. They're just the kids.
Of like a Friday evening, as a curtain raiser.
Yeah, no, that's all fine. But if you actually want to grow the women's game, then you should have maybe have a separate window designated all for themselves, their own Six Nations. That's kind of separate. 100%. Nice.
And if it coincides with club games, well, there is still intrigue in club games. It's definitely a more women's internationals are more comfortable competing with that than the biggest bleeding rugby matches of the year for their countries and the other end of it. Absolutely. I like that.
Then in other news, the fixture list for the 2020-21 championship has been confirmed. I think we mentioned it in the context of England earlier.
The second tier English championship.
The English championship, which obviously has Saris in it, hence the vested interest there. But it's been confirmed, and although one club has opted out of this season, that would be London Scottish, they're going to play no part in this campaign. But the league is going to return and going to play 10 competitive matches, and it's going to start on March 6th. So it's still a ways away yet. We have to wait till March, but Saracens are going to start.
I'm not going to be watching it too closely, given it's a second tier competition. But 11 teams competing, 10 games, no home and away, just one fixture, which is grand with no crowds. Come on. And then a 2-legged playoff final, as is traditional, in June for promotion. And Saracens start their campaign away at the Cornish Pirates on March 6th. And Saracens have been beaten twice, granted with secondary teams. They've been beaten twice now by the Ealing Trailfinders, who I believe are their number one contemporary as far as promotion.
Wouldn't you love to see Ealing Trailfinders getting promotion and Sarri staying down? Stranger things have happened.
The reality is that the 2-legged playoff for first and second is just so mitigating for Saracens. It's unreal. Like it's not a one-off. It's not like falling behind and finishing second. They can still get into the playoff, and then if they lose one game, they can still have another. So it seems almost predetermined that Saracens are going to come back up. And Owen Farrell and the boys are going to be playing championship rugby. So they've wounded but will return, and I honestly think that's right. I don't think it's right to just bury them forever and like there was threat in COVID time of this championship not going ahead and the Saracens guys being stuck in limbo. I think it's better for English rugby that Saracens come back up, and it'll be interesting to see how they compete after the annus horribilis that they in many ways inflicted on themselves, in every way inflicted on themselves.
They did. There was very little sympathy going around for them, but there is fact that England haven't looked as good as when Saris were the best team in England.
I'm not sure if it's the best thing for English rugby, the downfall of Saracens, but it certainly is fine.
It's certainly funny too. There's a fair bit of schadenfreude around all these other nations in terms of watching Saris go down. But so that is obviously a factor as well. And then another bit of news is that 2 new exciting innovations are going to be introduced for Super Rugby Aotearoa, which is the goal line dropout and the captain's referral, which was a factor. It did happen in Super Rugby AU last year.
The goal line dropout did, but I'm not sure if the captain's referral did.
Right.
What's interesting about the captain's referral is that it's for things the TMO would check anyway for most of the game. So it's like if it's a try scoring opportunity or if it's foul play, captain can refer it upstairs, which is like basically just calling the video ref out for not seeing something that they saw. But then the interesting thing is that it can be any offence, not a scrum or line out, but any penalty offence after 75 minutes of a game. the captain can say check for a penalty for any offence.
Interesting.
Not sure if I like it.
It might slow the game down a little
loads
bit.
kind of hustle, like because then you end up in this situation where captain goes, that's a side entry there on the third phase, and then the TMO is looking and going like, all right, where are you looking, captain? And it's like, oh, the third phase, and then you're just having this really slow situation.
Yeah.
And it's like it's definitely going to be used as like a clock
killing
momentum killing thing by a team that's in the lead at some point, going like, that was a side entry there on the third ruck. Just roll the tape on a bit. No, slow it down. That's the one. You see where he just enters kind of from the side there, no? Timo going, no, I don't think so.
Come on.
It's so open to interpretation that I just don't think it works as well as a challenge does in other sports. It seems like it's just robbed straight from the NFL or from other games. Like there's so many games with challenges. Like I just don't think it works in rugby.
And the one that I thought was interesting in terms of what Super Rugby AU did last year is the 50-22, and that hasn't been introduced.
No.
But I would like to see it introduced, because as I was highlighting, it may reintroduce the spiral, although England's strategy seems to have reintroduced the spiral for me already. It's my favourite kick in rugby, the spiral kick. It's very effective at finding grass because it kind of travels further, faster, and dips, so it's a useful thing. And if there's a 50-22 rule whereby if you kick it from within your own half into the opponent's 22, when it bounces in you win the line out, it's kind of a good way of nullifying teams that have all of their defenders up in the line and punishing them and encouraging people to kick differently and kick for grass. I think that's more of a useful innovation or a useful law to bring in than the captain's referral. As far as the goal line dropout is concerned, I think that's fine.
I don't mind it.
Mind it. It doesn't make much odds. It's just kind of quicker. It's a quicker way to restart the game.
I think the 22 is almost too easy and out. But then I can't quite remember, is the goal line dropout what circumstance? I'd have to look it up before I comment on it, but I can't quite remember what circumstances. It's not just if you kick the ball dead.
No, I think it's carried back.
Oh, it's for if it's
instead of a scrum 5, I think.
Ooh.
Yeah.
No, I don't like it.
I think that's what the law is, and it was introduced in Australian one first last year,
so
because they don't like scrums.
If you're pinned down on your own line
and you carry it back,
like if you're the scrum half, why don't you just tap?
Yeah.
Now you have to go away, and I can kick it from the goal line with ease. I know it's a drop kick, but I don't love the goal line drop out, to be honest with you. Well, despite not knowing everything about it, I don't trust it inherently. But the other one that they introduced, which I think is an obvious one for all of rugby, and I don't understand why it's not adopted, is the golden point after a draw.
Makes good sense.
Yeah, I think draws are fine in the regular season. I wouldn't change that. I think it's fine to have a result be a draw, not like an American where every game has to have a win.
Yeah.
Like draws happen.
Yeah.
Some games are draws. That's fine.
Yeah.
But in knockout rugby, obviously you need a winner,
and you don't want to have a situation where Martin Williams is kicking a penalty kick as we had before.
I just don't understand why there has to be 20 more minutes of a game after we're level. If we end up level, all right, next score wins.
Yeah,
I think that makes all the sense in the world. And now where there's issues is when you can say if one team gets the coin flip and has the restart, they're going to have a massive advantage. You get to kick off and launch it down into your opponent's territory. That makes sense. The interesting thing is what the NFL does.
Yeah, where you have a chance to respond. If a team has one drive and they score, you have a drive to respond.
Yeah, well, it's a golden try. It's or a golden touchdown. So that's what I would love to see them introduce. Is not golden point, but golden try. So if you score a try,
that ends the game.
That ends the game. And if you score a 3-pointer, it keeps going until I would say 10 minutes. You still run the 2 10-minute halves, but at half time, if someone has a lead, it's over.
Yeah.
I think that's much better, because I think you should be looking to end the game. I don't know why we have to play 20 more minutes after
everyone's gassed and everyone's out of subs.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to make any sense
stuff.
to me. Just next score wins. Let's go.
What do you get into that ridiculous Harry Potter situation whereby if a team kicks 3... if you get
Harry Potter,
as in Quidditch, is if a team kicks 3-pointers and doesn't end the game, and then the other team scores a try by riposte and is still 2 points down, does that end the game? Well,
that's not going to happen.
No, probably not. But it's like, what happens there?
That's completely destroyed my point, hasn't it? You've ruined it. You've ruined it. My whole thing.
Yeah, but you just like when someone catches the snitch, even though you're like 400 points down, and it's like, what are you doing?
Try just wins you the game anyway.
Maybe. So they were 12 points up from all their 3-pointers.
3-second 3-pointers. Screw you. You should have scored a try. Try wins.
Yeah, maybe.
I like the idea of a golden try.
I do too.
Just because it takes away the advantage you get from winning the coin toss and the restart.
So
which is the big singular problem.
So
with
in
the
that
NFL
one scenario that I painted, then is it not golden? Or if they're 2 scores down and they score the try?
Yeah, that's your workaround. It's not. It's no longer a golden try then.
Yeah,
because they're still behind.
Yeah.
You just play on.
Okay.
But once you reach half time, it's over.
Right.
You don't bother with the second half if someone has a lead at half time.
Yeah,
because why would you?
Yeah, indeed. I agree with that. I do agree with that. Like when we saw it actually in the Curry Cup final, the 100 minutes plus, and it's like players were gassed, and it was not good.
It doesn't seem like the most logical way to end the game.
No.
And then it does run the risk of a team taking the lead and another team matching them, and then all of a sudden you're back to kick tennis, which is what no one wants, or kicking competitions.
Yeah,
which is not the way to end
it's
a
what
rugby
people
match.
are trying to discourage from.
Yeah, it's
from
not the way to end a
game.
rugby match, as we all know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so,
we probably waffled on for way too long.
Yes, we probably have. But with that, I suppose we will wrap up the show. It's been another mighty one. It's another great week of Six Nations rugby is definitely ahead of us. It's been the focus of the show, as is right and proper.
Indeed.
Good luck to all the teams and all of you in terms of your vested interest. We'll be watching on our vested interest come on Sunday. We're nervous, but excited,
Yeah, we shall see. I would love to see something from Ireland. That would be something good from Ireland.
That would be delightful. And again, if you've made it this far, geez, fair play to you. Some amount of stamina, because we're fairly fading right now.
How many sittings did it take you?
Yeah,
let us know down below.
This is it. If you do enjoy the content, please do like, subscribe, and share with your rugby loving friends. And do leave a comment down below, as we say. We'd like to get a good bit of rugby discourse going on down below in the comment section. So leave
good
your
interesting chat. Any opinions you have on stuff we've said, any thoughts that you've had of your own in terms of like what teams are doing, what you think might happen.
Yeah.
If you're watching after the games happened, where you think teams went right and wrong. We love to hear all that stuff. I think fan opinions are great, and I think the rugby discourse has the potential to be a much healthier one than you see in other sports sometimes.
Yes,
and,
probably true.
I definitely value that, and I definitely think that we have a small but good fan base at the moment.
Yes.
So it's definitely the comments section is a nice and healthy place, which I think is a great thing.
We'll keep it that way. But for now we will leave it there. See you next week, folks.
Bye.
Bye. Right, you're up.
I'm always up first.
I have a tough shot here because the light's in the way. Yeah, no joy.
We're getting worse at that.
Yeah, the darts.